and thank you, Mr. Wright, for being here. As we consider our energy future, we have so many challenges to deal with. Energy prices, energy poverty, as you've written about. Obviously, climate change is such a big one. As Secretary, do you think there's the possibility that the Department of Energy could finally begin to build a plan, a comprehensive plan on how we deal with the energy future, but also really take a hard look at climate change?
Senator, yes, indeed. I'm very interested in that idea, and it's certainly something I've been thinking about. The Department of Energy created a look into energy and what the future of energy might bring about 20 years ago. I think it's time to do that again and to look not just at energy and the energy trajectory we're on, but the other issues related to energy, and top among those, climate change.
And I think just on that note, and you have in the past, some time ago, but described how slowly climate change is evolving, and it's so far out in the future, it probably shouldn't command as much attention. And yet I continue, and I think a lot of people are concerned about the acceleration and how soon can we recognize those feedback loops. We're talking about the salinity of the oceans, the massive ice melts and calving of glaciers. Those things have the potential to create a much more rapid rate of change. And I think that's part of ability to get a plan. And as of 2024, they're saying we're at about 1.5 degrees Celsius in increased temperature. If it goes much faster than that, do you think we should have some contingency plans, like ready, so that we can address that scenario? Even now, we look at the fires in Los Angeles, some of the hurricanes, these extreme weather events, and we're obviously not prepared for them. We don't have an insurance system that works. Each of those suggests or command that we should have a backup systems in place.
No, absolutely, Senator. As you know, I've studied and followed the data and the evolution of climate change for at least 20 years now. It is a global issue. It is a real issue. It's a challenging issue. And the solution to climate change is to evolve our energy system. I've worked on that most all of my career, again, in nuclear and solar and geothermal and new battery storage technology now. Do I wish we could make faster progress? Absolutely. Are there things we can do, investments together through the Department of Energy, to accelerate development of new energy technologies that are really the only pathway to address climate change? Absolutely. We should have nothing but American leadership in this area. Energy and climate is a global problem, but America should be the leader. And I think President Trump is firmly aligned with that position as well.
Great. On a more parochial note, obviously the Renewable Energy Laboratory, in a large portion of that work is done in Colorado. You feel that those budgets are properly spent, or do you think they should be reevaluated?
It's too early for me to comment on something like that. I visited the National Renewable Energy Laboratory years ago as a fellow energy guy in Denver. A lot of great work there, a lot of great humans there that are driving innovation and that are working with businesses too. It's not just basic research in the lab. It's very focused on applied research and new technologies. So I'm very keen to engage in a more detailed level with what's being on there and how to drive that further and faster.
This, I think, is going to be the first time I've ever gotten 5 questions in with in testimony. So I'm not sure what that says. We spent a lot of work looking at the grid, and as we do begin to build infrastructure that can respond if we need to make more dramatic changes to our energy system, whether it's climate change or whatever other constraints may come along, we've really been stymied, both in terms of the permitting process and finding ways that we can make sure that we protect local communities, make sure that their voice is heard, make sure that we respect the environmental importance of our landscapes, but at the same time realize we've got to move more rapidly in building things like electrical infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit towards electrical infrastructure?
Yes, Senator. I think you've hit, in the energy world, the most pressing problem we have is our electricity grid. And this problem is only going to get worse. I'm very concerned about that. We need to change the gear we've been in the last several years, and we need to get serious about building infrastructure and investment, bringing the cost of electricity prices back down, and keeping our grid stable. I'm deeply concerned about our current trajectory.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Governor, for being here. Appreciate this. It's always good to have other governors in the room, or former governors, I guess, at this point. I've got 3 questions, so I'm going to be pretty quick in the questions, and I try to be unfailingly polite, but if I override you, it's just because I want to get to all 3 questions. Obviously, I worked on methane regulations back when I was governor. We were the first state or province anywhere in the world to actually regulate methane, but we did it by working with the industry. They came and helped create the regulations that they were going to guide them. Senator Cassidy was just talking about abandoned wells. It's all part of that same problem. As Secretary of the Interior, how do you think you can use your authority to advance rules that boost innovation in the energy sector to, let's reduce methane is one thing, but I'll broaden the question and say, and getting to better, cleaner energy that's at the same time reliable and at a low cost?
Well, I should say, Mayor, Governor, Senator, I love this question because the focus on innovation. We've seen in North Dakota, again, the federal regulation comes in, it's proposed, it goes through the rule changing. It takes years to finally get it finalized, then it gets finalized, and then all of a sudden you got a federal employee in a white pickup with a clipboard, driving around that the taxpayers are paying for, trying to find out if we've got an emission here, emission there. Meanwhile, if that's 6 to 8 years from the beginning of a problem to when the rule gets finalized and is actually enforced, we've gone through like 4 or 5 cycles of Moore's.
Get to the innovation.
Yeah, we've gone through 4 or 5 cycles of Moore's Law, and then someone's got a solution to say we can do methane capture at the well, we can do it cheaply, we can do it this. They implement it, they can capture it, they can turn it into electricity, they can, do power generation for a data center on site and on a well site. I mean, the amount of innovation that is occurring right now in the energy industry is unbelievable. It's as exciting as anything in tech that's going on. And so that's why I say innovation over regulation. We can solve these problems cheaper, faster, and quicker than we can through expensive and outdated regulations.
Yeah, we've never needed more innovation in a short time than we need in energy right now. As the energies are, on the other side, there have been a lot of reports about tariffs on critical minerals that possibly on everything, and they're from all different, a lot of people are saying a lot of different things. So in terms of imposing tariffs without having a clear strategy on how we're going to secure the supply chains for these critical minerals essential to our defense, to our aerospace industry, go down the list, what's your plan to collaborate with our allies to make sure that we can ensure a reliable supply chain on these critical minerals?
Well, I think the key there is allies, because we need to be, we have to have a security network of people that are truly our allies, and we have to be able to buy and sell from each other around these critical minerals. But right now, we've been, over the last 20 years, we were, as a nation, one of the great mining economies in the world 20 years ago. It's become a dirty word. You can hardly find a kid in college that wants to go into geology or geologic or
Don't
mining.
you're hurting me.
Well, you were there.
I am a geologist.
Yes, you are.
Or I was.
But you understand in your profession how that has shifted in your lifetime, and we've got to bring it back, because this is critical to our nation's future. And again, when we can do it here with innovation, better, cleaner, and safer than the world, we're actually helping the world environment when we do it in the United States.
We can set those standards, and I agree completely that we are the ones who are going to create a better way to extract minerals with less pollution and less risk. Last question. Obviously, public land is a key part of Colorado, just like they are of North Dakota. I commend you. I think what you did as a governor, you took a lot of what we did and did it better. It's very frustrating, but we governors like to give credit where credit is due. We have certain places in Colorado, and we discussed this when you were in my office last week, and I appreciate you taking the time with all that you've got going on to come and spend an hour with us. We have some places where local governments, the local community, the ranchers have kind of joined arms side by side to protect lands. We have one piece of land there that's called the Thompson Divide. And it's been somewhat controversial. There's one mining or oil company that felt that there was potential there. I took a pretty deep look at the seismic and couldn't see much source there, much potential, but it's been controversial. I wanted to make sure, A, to extend the invitation that you come to Colorado, which I'm sure everyone up here is, even if they haven't said it, they look forward to it. But to come and walk that landscape with some of the local ranchers and farmers there, so you can get a sense that this isn't a partisan issue. This is a piece of land that pretty much everyone in the community has decided needs to be protected.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I would look forward to it, Senator.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate having that on the record.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Governor. Appreciate you having
Thank you, Senator.
being with us.
Senator Hickenlooper.
I ran down the hall to get here. I didn't want to miss my chance for a second question, second round of questions. And again, thank you for your service as a governor all the way through your career. You've shown a real inclination both through your government service, but through your philanthropy to engage in the community and to go to the community. I think the letters from the tribes and what I've heard from our tribes in Colorado, that you are held in very, very high esteem, I think, across this country. And I think that's going to be a powerful thing. I have one curious question. I think they're still doing it with the Western Governors Association. Do they still meet with the Secretary of the Interior in December, or did they stop doing that?
There's been a tradition to meet with the Secretary of Interior when they have their annual meeting in Washington, D.C., which is usually in late January, early February, and I would look forward to having the opportunity for that invitation. If you know anybody there that could be, send me one.
Well, just I knew that other governors are watching our discussion, so I wanted to make sure I got that out there.
I think your own Governor Polis may be the current chair. So maybe
This
you could put
governor
it in
thing's
order.
getting kind of thick, isn't it?
Well, it's distilled down pretty much to just us left. I want to talk a little bit about the Colorado River, and it's at least it's a 25-year drought, but a longer-term drought, and we're able to go back. This is the geologist in me, but there's sediments throughout the Grand Canyon that can be correlated, and this appears to be the worst drought in 10,000 years. I mean, this is a serious drought, and you've got 40 million people that depend on this, and we've been working aggressively with the lower basin states and the upper basin states. And one of the things I was, even before you began running for the highest office, the work that you did around water in North Dakota, where roughly it was the largest investments in water infrastructure ever, but half of it was for making sure you got clean water, and half of it was to make sure you were protecting against flood, I thought was a great model for what the Department of Interior would have. And I think you have to kind of look at the Colorado River in that sense too. I think that the Bureau of Reclamation plays a significant role there, but I think a strong leader being able to find and incentivize those innovations of how do we make sure we're saving water and doing more with the water that we have rather than fighting over it. And there's a long tradition in the West of whiskeys for drinking, waters for fighting, as we said last week. Anyway, speak a little bit about that, of how you look at of kind of working with the Colorado River, but there are a whole number of river basins that are in drought right now.
Yes, and we've got a tremendous water resource in this country. When we think about the Great Lakes, you think about the Columbia, you think about the Yukon, the Mississippi sometimes is flooding when the Colorado's in drought. We just maybe don't have it all in the right places at the right time, and where we've got population centers. And so I think, again, with smart planning, innovation, collaboration, when we've been successful in North Dakota with private-public partnerships, it's included, solutions, again, with great help from Senator Hoeven, playing a huge role on the federal. I mean, one of the projects we have there is a couple $2 billion. It's a third federal, it's a third local with a local sales tax, huge buy-in locally, and then the state stepping up and participating. So, and when we did that together, this project's going to get done in 6.5 or 7 years, as opposed to 20 or 25 or never. With something, because we have that experience in North Dakota too. We got water projects at the federal level that were started in the 1960s that still haven't fulfilled their full mission.
Right.
So anyway, I think there's an opportunity to work together to come up with solutions.
And that timeliness does magnify what can get done. The Bureau of Reclamation has done a lot of work in Colorado, I think across the West, and I think I'm universal that I haven't heard a single senator, Republican or Democrat, complain about how they've approached this. They have a bunch of projects that are midway, and I'm hopeful that I know there's going to be there's a lot of talk about a tax cut and a lot of talk about how they're going to pay for that tax cut. Hopefully, we can protect those funds that have been committed to various water projects, because the worst thing you can have, and this has happened to Colorado 2 or 3 times over the past several decades, where you get halfway out, you're building something, and then all of a sudden the support goes away.
Yeah, agree. I mean, having a secure and predictable forms of capital for these projects. When you have the instability, the uncertainty, then the people that are bidding on the projects bid higher. They have to take out more risk on their side. Their insurance companies that are supporting them on the private side say, don't do this. When we were able to go to the private-public partnership and we could create certainty that they would have the permits, that lowered the cost dramatically, and not only the time to get it done, but it also lowered the cost.
That's music to my ears, and we agree completely. So we'll remember this conversation 3 years from now, and I'm sure who knows what the future will bring. But I appreciate that commitment to the long-term solutions. I think that is necessary on almost every level in this country.
Great, thank you, Senator.
Thank you,
Senator. I'll note that loved the geothermal discussion. Senator Heinrich and I have a bill together on geothermal. We've got access to heat like that. Might as well harness it just as we would with Puff the Magic Dragon. If we could find and harness him, we'd make power out of him somehow. Senator Hickenlooper, and then we'll go to Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, glad to back. I don't think I have to extend an invitation to come to Colorado.
I accept.
And I do appreciate, and there was some, I understand how quickly things were working and how hard you worked to get your financial information, your ethical disclosures, the FBI background check, that we didn't get it until never saw it. I had a dinner last night, and then I had meetings starting this morning. But I do look at geothermal, which I share your enthusiasm, and I want to ask a question about how rapidly you think it can scale. But it is something so promising. Obviously, you've thought through your conflict of interest in something like that, where you've helped dramatically, you've been part of the catalyst to allow the geothermal that we can imagine at scale. At least I'm imagining at scale. You thought through that. I don't have any of the numbers in front of me yet.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator. But my involvement with a particular company, I think a leader in next generation geothermal, Fervo Energy, I will sever all ties, financial involvement with Fervo in everything I do in energy. I'm still passionate about it. I'm going to be a champion for it. But and even in my world in the small modular reactor, our company, and I'm a director of one of those small modular reactor companies, but I'm cheering for all of them. And yes, I will sever all of my ties from across the whole energy space. But I won't sever my passion for seeing those technologies advance to better American lives.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you're open to discussing it with other senators once they've seen those documents, that they have questions. That I appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah. Given the compressed time frame, if anyone has any questions about anything in my disclosure form, as you know, sometimes to your detriment, I'm an open book, and so are you.
Fair enough. In terms of geothermal, and you know the details better than I. How rapid can we get that to scale? Because the transformational capability of that, as you've described before, it can do some of the making of things. It can be high temperature that actually does displace hydrocarbons in a successful way.
So Fervo right now is building a 400 megawatt plant in Senator Lee's state. And one of the reasons they can do it in that scale is there already is nearby electrical infrastructure. But Senator, we'll circle back to everyone's top issue today. One of the limiters in the growth of geothermal is there's so many resources out there, but there aren't easy ways to connect to power lines to sell that power to users. There are a number. So we're going to see gigawatts come on in the next few years. But could it be tens of gigawatts with infrastructure? It could.
Right, well, we're aligned on that, and I have a couple bills that we've worked on, the Big Wires Act. You'll get immersed in all that soon enough. Let me talk a little bit about nuclear waste, because we haven't really talked about that. But I was someone when I was a kid protested against nuclear energy, couldn't get my arms around how we deal with the waste. I think looking now at some of the risks of climate change and the potential, the possibility that acceleration of climate change is worse than they think, makes the issues around the waste, we still have to deal with it and deal with it safely. Have you got any ideas of how to do that and help, especially some of the younger people in this country are very concerned about that, about nuclear as a solution, but it's clean, it has high temperature capability, it can do so many things if we can figure out how to deal with the waste.
Yeah, and I think that the concern of kids and us when we were young and everyone else of nuclear and of climate change, they're all very justified concerns. These are real things. Radioactive materials are dangerous. But fortunately, I think with engineering and sensible regulation and safeguards, I think the nuclear waste problem is one of the most manageable problems because the volume of waste is relatively small. Like we've been selling commercial nuclear power for over 70 years. And all of that waste today is in swimming pools on location, cooling off at the start, and then it's in big dry casks right on location in urban or suburban areas. So, and it's been there for 70 years. And the radioactivity near those power plants is lower than Grand Central Station in New York City, the subway station. So I think even without permanent repository, we've been able to do that in a safe way. It's better in the long run to have a more remote, probably deep storage, but there's many ways to do it. I think the politics of it are the trickiest part, but they matter. You need to have people on board. We don't want people with fear and anxiety about what's going on. So it's a political and social challenge, but technically, can we deal with nuclear waste safely? I believe firmly we can, and we have.
Well, thank you. And I'm out of time, but I think that discussion, we're going to have to figure out how to have that national discussion to make sure people are aware of how engineering and how technology and innovation can help us make sure that is truly safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
I hope we're not actually seeing them in swimming pools where people are swimming. Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, I'm also...
Great, and I appreciate Senator Curtis referring to the last three as being the best, saving the best to the last. Although I bumped you out of that bottom three. I apologize for that. Mr. Electing, thank you for your time. Thanks for all that you've done. I think some of the stories of how you responded to not just the crisis of 9/11, but many crises in your life illuminates the kind of person you are, and I respect that. I've got a couple questions around Tether. I was here earlier when you talked about allowing, when we get AI in government, we can follow it pretty quickly. But we know that Russia's used it to buy drone parts and to avoid sanctions. That one of the main financiers for Iran had $100 million moving it around using Tether. It's used in a lot of scams with Americans. What is the best way, in your sense, I mean, if we're going to try and limit and be efficient with government regulation, how do we try to crack down on these illicit uses of something like Tether? I mean, what's your perspective? I'm not trying to say that you should be held accountable. I'm just trying to figure out, how would you suggest, whether it's Commerce or Congress, how do we approach that?
So we only know that illicit activity is done on the blockchain because it's done on the blockchain, meaning when these same illicit characters use dollars or euros, we don't know about it. You know, remember when we went into Iraq, we found, pallets of $100 bills. So the way to do it is to require that anyone who is a U.S.-backed stablecoin must onboard U.S. law enforcement and must allow U.S. law enforcement and our AI tools into their models so that we can go find and catch the illicit activity. Because remember, it's a central book. That means it can be found, it can be traced. Right. Our AI tools will rip illicit activity out of stablecoins within a year or two. Our technology on their blockchain will end it. And that's what we should require. Makes perfect sense.
And so you'll collaborate, work with us on time in terms of making that, creating that kind of legislation and rule and law.
Absolutely.
Great. I think one of the arguments also, we don't have to go into this, but is to open a bank account. People have to know who you are to, sign up and receive and trade Tether. There's really no easy way to know who people are in that context at the beginning. Eventually, you know.
Well, Tether only, the stablecoin issuers only issue to KYC approved people. But what happens is it's like dollars. I can withdraw it out of the bank, but when I buy something, it goes on and on and on and on. So it's really the secondary market that is, people are just using an electronic dollar in the same way they use a real dollar. And it's much easier to catch an electronic dollar than it ever would be to catch a physical dollar. Great. Much better.
Got it. I know I won't go through the tech hubs things because I know that Senator Curtis was adamant that they had perhaps the best tech hub in the Mountain West. I just want to point out that Elevate Quantum, which is includes several Rocky Mountain states, is a tech hub that we want to make sure that you come out. Don't just visit Utah. It's a lovely place. Skiing is not quite the same as Colorado's, but we're going to make sure we get you when you're coming out west. We want you to make multiple stops. I spent a lot of work on critical minerals. Obviously, they are a fundamental building block for aerospace and clean energy, semiconductors, AI, go down the list. And whether you're talking about the extraction of minerals or the processing of those minerals, we're falling way behind. And the Department's International Trade Administration has a responsibility for kind of growing our exports, overseeing trade, and really, I think, helping to secure supply chains, essential supply chains for these critical minerals. How would you work to ensure that we have sufficient sourcing and processing capabilities in this country?
We've got to reduce the regulatory burdens on your miners so that they can mine those critical materials for America. We need to bring domestic mining back. We can't stop mining in America and buying it overseas. It's not healthy for us from a national security perspective, and it's not healthy for your domestic economy. So I think we are supposed to be mining in Colorado. It's an amazing place that's got incredible resources, and we need to bring those resources for the use of America and improve the economy of Colorado, but also improve the national security of America.
Great. If I could just have 20 seconds. In terms of that critical, and I agree with you completely, it's not, and it's also the environmental. In other countries, when they're extracting and processing these minerals, their environmental standards are a fraction of what we require in this country.
Exactly.
Are you in favor? Do you see a possibility for some sort of a tariff system that, like what Senator Curtis was referring to, in terms based on the environmental depredations that come from processing and extracting minerals in foreign countries that have no standards, and what that does to the atmosphere that we all utilize?
I think that's a key, should be a part of the study for sure, is that someone else is mining with coal and spewing it into the air, and we're worried about the fact that we would do it 100 times better for the atmosphere, but instead we don't do it. We buy it from them, they spew it in the air, and then they put it on a tanker and drive it to us and pollute all the way across. It seems, if you take it as a whole, illogical. We should be doing it in Colorado. We should be mining in Nevada. We should be mining, all right, we had a great lithium find in Arkansas. We have the Iron Range. America is amazing, but we are not using our assets to the best that we possibly can, and it is time that we do it.
Okay, so you would support that, some sort of a tariff to actually accelerate that process?
Sounds smart.
Great, thank you.
Senator from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. President, I would like first to recognize the great senator from New Jersey, Senator Cory Booker. It's never easy or fair to speak after him. But I take the floor today to urge my colleagues to vote no on President Trump's nominee to the Office of Budget and Management, Russell Vought. Some remember Mr. Vought from when he served as the head of the same agency during President Trump's first term. He is one of very few repeat appointments, clearly a reflection of his loyalty. You may also know him for his leadership, his authoring of Project 2025 that far-right agenda that the president, during the campaign, swore up and down that he had no idea about. And I believe in that, although I think he understood many discussions, perhaps outlined the framework. Project 2025 would get our long-standing and globally admired framework of checks and balances. It would gut them. It would ensure civil servants will be hired and fired on the basis of political loyalty, something that this country has struggled for many decades to get rid of. It would truly weaponize our system of justice. Again, something that almost everyone works towards keeping nonpartisan. It lays out in detail a plan to dramatically change our American system of government, perhaps for a very long time. It's really not a question of if anymore. The plan and the people putting it in place are disregarding laws and norms dating back to the Constitution. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. This means firing or pushing out vast swaths of the federal workforce of civil servants. These are career civil servants, many of whom have devoted their lives to keeping our government running, from processing Social Security checks and keeping our weather systems afloat, or helping to stop waste, fraud, and abuse. Some would say our federal workers don't do anything, but they are honest, hard-working Americans. And Project 2025 is just getting started. If confirmed, Mr. Vogt, and Project 2025 could have devastating consequences for Colorado. Deep in Project 2025 are plans to heavily restrict access to contraceptives and abortion medication, denying women and families the freedom to make their own reproductive decisions. Plans to make health care more expensive by repealing policies that empower Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices and drive down the cost of health care for seniors. Plans to make Colorado less resilient to these increasingly frequent disasters caused by extreme weather. And they're already reinstating cruel immigration policies and threatening to come after the LGBTQ community. At a time when grocery prices are rising on everything from eggs to meat, Project 2025 is going to make life harder for Colorado farmers and ranchers, and more risky. Project 2025 would cut safety nets for our ag producers when they have a bad season. It includes plans to gut essential crop insurance. Project 2025 even wants government to get involved in the specific techniques our ranchers use to farm. Now, our Colorado farmers know their land better than anyone else. Hanging small farmers out to dry does nothing to lower grocery prices for America. We've been hearing in our offices from producers across the state who are very concerned about what this Project 2025 means to them. We have over 38,000 farm operations in Colorado. Some harvest wheat, some raise meat or poultry, some specialize in dairy. All of them support our rural communities and play an essential role in feeding families really all across the country. We don't have to speculate about what Mr. Vogt would do to the Office of Management and Budget. He's really laid it all out in Project 2025. He wrote Project 25 to a large extent himself. One of his finest contributions, a section championing the executive branch's ability to overreach and, quote unquote, impound funds. Let's not mince words. This is, by all historic measures, blatantly unconstitutional. Congress alone has the authority to decide how government spends its money. This isn't an opinion. It says explicitly in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. Made by law. Designated by Congress. And again in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Excuse me, I think, like everyone, I've got a flu. We got a taste of how Mr. Vogt would attempt to execute something like this last week. In a truly chaotic, late-night, two-page memo, the Trump administration halted all federal grants and loans. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Federal spending for a staggering number of programs. Programs that provide Americans health care, food, nutrition, housing, child care, so much else. The memo stemmed from an executive order calling on federal agencies to review and eliminate spending on woke ideologies, or, quote unquote, the New Green Deal. Both things that aren't clearly defined and don't in any specific way exist. In this rush to create chaos and jumble policy, the implementers didn't bother to specify which programs would continue, which programs would end. Our office and our staff were immediately flooded with calls, hundreds and then thousands of calls. We heard from folks in every quarter of Colorado, big cities, small towns, asking, what does this mean for them and their families? There was real fear, real worry, and for good reason. The Trump administration tried to walk back the original memo to clarify that the freeze wouldn't affect individual payments like Social Security or food stamp benefits, but that didn't clear up too much. It certainly didn't help that the White House press secretary couldn't answer specific questions like pertaining to specific government programs like Medicaid, whether they were going to be affected. Frustrating as it is, and I get how frustrating it is, there are reasons why government moves slowly. All of this, if implemented as requested, would have had a devastating impact on Colorado, a devastating impact. Federal programs and funds make up roughly 25% of our state's effort to build transportation and infrastructure, provide needed services for the most needy in our state. Head Start, a truly vital service for over 9,000 low-income kids in Colorado, would be forced to shutter its operations that provide for these low-income kids of all communities with the early childhood education, health, and nutrition that they need. Even as we speak, there are reports that Head Start providers around the nation are not able to access funds. If implemented, it would cut off 83,000 low-income Colorado families from the low-income home energy assistance program, which helps heat their homes in a cold winter. These are folks that in many cases are unable to pay their heating bills and wouldn't be able to heat their homes without this assistance. Our public safety and law enforcement would be weakened. The pause would strip funding that helps our local agencies prevent terrorism, helps them crack down on drug trafficking, and prevent crimes and provide services for those who have been victimized by crime. Colorado has one of the largest veteran populations in the country, something we're very proud of. But this funding would cut resources for those vets. It would cut resources for community-based suicide prevention efforts, organizations that provide care for veterans experiencing homelessness, and services for veterans living with disabilities, many of them taken in the defense of our nation. Hard to be cruel to those who've given their country so much. Before entering public service, I was in the restaurant business. At our brew pub in downtown Denver, we'd cook, pack, and donate meals every year to Meals on Wheels to feed seniors throughout the metro Denver area. I've seen firsthand the difference this makes, the relief it provides to seniors who need it. Many of them don't leave the house, are so grateful to have someone come and they can talk to as they get their meal. But the federal funding freeze left Meals on Wheels in Colorado, but all across the country, unsure of how and whether they'll be able to continue serving meals. Over 25,000 Coloradan seniors every day rely on Meals on Wheels to access food. Why would we leave our seniors hungry and unsure when their next hot lunch is going to come? Our office also heard directly from a Colorado Rural Health Organization about how this federal funding freeze would have life or death effects on Coloradans in 47 rural counties. I'm sorry. When we're in towns like Cortez or Hugo or Julesburg, when we hear all the time about how our rural hospitals, clinics, and community health centers are already strained by workforce shortages, by rising costs, these medical providers are on the front lines of dealing with our nation's mental health and opioid crisis, and we're cutting their ability to provide these services. These folks in rural Colorado and in suburbs around every city in Colorado are watching their friends, family, and neighbors struggle with mental health issues that rose up after the pandemic. This funding freeze wouldn't just strip funding from these programs, it would force our critical rural hospitals to lay off staff or turn away patients at a time when they need it most. We should be fighting to increase access to quality, affordable health care, no matter where people live, not take it away. The federal funding freeze has already been blocked by the courts several times because it is blatantly illegal. It makes no sense. But make no mistake, Mr. Vogt and the Trump administration will keep poking and prodding our courts and our Constitution until they get their way. All of these actions serve a sinister purpose: to completely transform our government into one that gives enormous tax cuts, largely directed at those who don't need them, and in many cases in Colorado don't want them, and puts working class Americans out to pasture. The federal funding freeze is just one of many chaotic actions that Mr. Vogt and the administration are pushing. We see Project 2025 come into clarity in this administration's illegal attempts to dismantle agencies without congressional approval, or their attempts to access Americans' sensitive data. Look, I'm all for cutting government waste. If you want to seriously look at how we spend money and where we can cut actual fraud, waste, and abuse, I'm game. A more efficient government will help us all, but that's not what's happening. I've worked as hard as I could to find ways to work across the aisle, and that's not going to change. When I was mayor of Denver, when I was governor of Colorado, We balance the budget every year. And we worked hard to try and streamline government processes, just like every mayor and every governor in this country. You can't just shove working families under the bus or violate the law to do it. We'll fight these attempts in the courts, on the floor of the Senate, like now, and everywhere else we can to defend Colorado and the Constitution. It's time to use every tool at our disposal to disrupt what Mr. Vogt and his Project 2028 are trying to do. We've supported these lawsuits, we've opposed executive actions, and we voted against nominees. But if we need to hold the Senate floor like we're doing now, vote all night, disrupt business as usual, we'll do that too. I will oppose every nominee that poses a genuine threat to Coloradans. That's why I'm here on the floor and will vote no on Mr. Vogt today. Coloradans sent us to Washington to solve problems, not to create more. Project 2025, it's a brutal plan to wreak havoc on our nation and really change the way our government operates, the way our democracy functions. I hope people all over the state emulate that old movie Network, that they can shout out at every corner, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to stand for it." Let's hope they get so loud that they can't be drowned out. Mr. President, I yield back the floor.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. McMahon, for your public service and for coming back and going through all this. Again, I thought when you were talking to Senator Blunt Rochester, your comment that bullying shouldn't happen anywhere is true, is absolutely true. It shouldn't happen in schools. It shouldn't happen in homes. It shouldn't happen in government. And I'm not going to go over, I agree on the things so much you've covered, anti-Semitism and making sure that there's great clarity around that. I want to talk a little bit about history and the teaching of history. I used to talk about topophilia, which means love of place. And I believe it's a basic building block of economic development of people's affection for a place. And that affection comes largely through the teaching of the history of that part of your state or your county, however that gets broken down. But I think teaching every part of our history is important. Colorado, some of the worst parts of our history, Governor Ralph Carr, a Republican governor who's one of the few Western governors who, when we were putting large detention facilities together for Japanese Americans during at the beginning of World War II, he said not only we're not going to support that, but any Japanese Americans who want to come should come to live in Colorado and live freely. We had the Sand Creek Massacre, where Colorado volunteers slaughtered almost 200, mostly women and children. But I think you mentioned in your testimony that the importance of teaching true history. And I understand the emphasis on positive, but I want to make sure that we agree on the teaching of all of it, both positive and negatives, just because as an entrepreneur, you learn more from your mistakes than from what you do right. And I think making sure that we don't gloss over the troubling parts of our history that we're not letting that slip behind us.
Well, clearly, I do agree that we should teach our history, the true history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we don't learn unless we recognize our mistakes. I will state that the Department of Education does not establish curriculum, but that is handled at the state level. But clearly, I am in favor of our history being taught exactly as it happened.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And it's funny that a lot of people don't. So it's good to get that on the record. We talked a little bit about apprenticeships and the importance of apprenticeships. I think the comment you made just that almost 2/3 of our kids, when they graduate from high school, cannot read proficiently is a disgrace that we should all not accept. And as I think as you recognize, it's not that we don't have good teachers. I think we have great teachers in every state. It's a very powerful statistic that in almost every survey, parents think that the school systems are broken except theirs. They think their school is pretty good. And I think that's a reflection of the quality of teachers we have. But this notion that everybody should go to college, I think is prevalent and persistent. You know, you've talked about the importance of alternative career pathways. When you were in the office, we discussed this. You know, one of the major issues we hear on trying to push apprenticeships, not just to trades and not adult apprenticeships at 18, but 16, 17, 18-year-olds while they're in high school going and working a couple days a week at an insurance company, could be a law firm, anywhere, but learning what a job place looks like, coming back to school and learning things that might make them more successful there. One of the problems is that type of an apprenticeship, so many of the academic advisors are just focused on that 4-year college track. And that's what the parents are kind of expecting. They may not even realize what apprenticeships are around there. What can you do as Secretary of Education to share with high schools all across America that these other alternative pathways are available?
Well, certainly I've been on the record even when I ran for the Senate in the state of Connecticut. I ran twice and didn't win, but I always talked about how we needed skills in our country that we did not have the trades that we need to have today. But I also talked about how parents, I think, are encouraging their children only to go to college and not necessarily recognizing that there are other avenues that those children could pursue. I clearly was a parent who were pushing both my children to go to college, but I realized today that there are other opportunities for students to succeed and enter into a pathway that they will be successful in their lives. So I think apprenticeships, internships, working the public-private sector to make sure that we have our curriculum that is designed for the needs of the communities and business. I think that's incredibly important. It's one of the things that we've striven to do at Sacred Heart University that I sit on the board of education. What are the needs of the community, and how can that curriculum be structured to satisfy that need? And that's, I think, critically important.
Great, and we're out of time. Of course, I've got millions more questions. Maybe we'll continue that discussion. I appreciate you being open about not wanting to end the Department of Education completely, and not your willingness to look at Pell Grants on a larger scale. Thank you. And thank you, Representative Chavez-Arima. I enjoyed our conversation last week and appreciate your enthusiasm. I thought I'd start with just a quick answer, a quick question, that if you track the shrinking of the middle class, which we've seen in this country over about the last 60 years, I think it's safe to say, it almost exactly tracks the reductions in unionized labor in terms of as a percentage of the workforce. They track almost perfectly. Do you agree that we want to get more workers in unions as a method to expand the middle class? Is that a worthy goal?
Well, I think the goal is the option. If people choose to organize, they should have a free and fair right to organize. And if they choose not to, they should also have that right.
But don't we want to have more? Isn't the country better off with more working people getting paid better wages? And really, the only way that generally happens is through union representation.
Well, again, supportive of both sides of the table is going to be important. If an employee chooses that they want to be in a union, in order they have the right to do so. And the same if they choose not to. It was just mentioned on the other side about, you know, what does it look like for the franchise model or the independent contractor model. So I think the flexibility and the conversation is what's key here. And is there room for both? I believe there is. The president certainly believes there is, because this is the new direction of where oftentimes we've had the extremes arguing. If we keep the American worker first and foremost, we're going to come to the center of that table and I think develop exactly what you're talking about, keeping more of their hard-earned dollars.
I appreciate that. And again, the ultimate goal, we want to expand the middle class. I appreciate your small business background as a small business person myself in a past life. I think that will be invaluable. We met last week with some of the leadership from the Cherry Creek School District in South Metro Denver, one of many that has innovative apprenticeship systems they put in place, and they're training teachers, HVAC technicians, engineers, aerospace manufacturers, go down the list, healthcare workers of various sorts. And this is just one of many programs we've got in Colorado. Now, the president's proposed funding freezes are going to prevent us from keeping many of these programs running in our state, and I think taking valuable opportunities away from the kids. How can you, as secretary, assuming you get approved, how can you protect these programs against attempts to unilaterally, and I think in some cases unlawfully, claw back the federal funding from these programs?
Well, I think the key here is going to be presenting to the president, again, I mentioned visiting and understanding exactly what's happening in Colorado and all the respective states, and presenting to the president as his advisor what's happening on the ground. That's what he wants to see, a candid, clear, concise picture, so that as we move forward in the America First agenda, that we're going to be supporting the American worker. That is first and foremost in his agenda. We're aligned in that. That's the conversation that we had, is that he wants to support the American worker. And so I will present to him the clear facts from all of the respective states.
Okay. Back to youth apprenticeships, which, as you know, I mean, my last 6 years as governor, that's what I spent a lot of time on, and I look at it as one of the great gaps that 65 to 70% of our kids aren't going to get a four-year degree, and we have done a piss-poor job of giving them the tools to acquire the skills necessary to have, the American dream. Is there ways that we can look at to expand apprenticeship programs, youth apprenticeship programs? So I'm not just talking about 18 and over. I'm talking about 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kids who could want to work in an accounting firm or an advanced manufacturing or a hospital, whatever. How can you see us expanding that through your tenure at the Department of Education?
Well, I think we can certainly agree that, and you heard the conversation about, speaking to even our youngest, our junior high, our middle school kids, all the way up into high school. But I would like to work with your office and, if confirmed, get into the Department of Labor, really expand and explore what can be done. But if I could work with your office specifically on this and get to know it a little bit better, I would like to have that conversation with you.
No, I will take that and we'll follow up on that. We'll get you out to Colorado. A lot of the records, on February 5th, DOGE went to the Department of Labor and demanded that certain federal employees' information be released. And I think there was a lot of retirement account, private information. We haven't seen I haven't seen any disclosure of how those records are going to be used. And I think, what are the reassurances that the American people have that those are still safely secure?
Well, I haven't seen them either because I have not been confirmed, as you all know. I have not been read in onto what is happening with DOGE in the Department of Labor. But if confirmed, that'll be the first thing I do, is make sure that I'm briefed on it and made aware of everything that's happening. So I don't have that answer for you because I don't know what's been happening either.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
This concludes.
Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. Appreciate how busy you all are. I think this is one of the key discussions we're going to have here all year. The Spectrum Relocation Fund, let me start with that, provides funding to federal agencies to research the feasibility of modifying and, if necessary, upgrading the federal systems that use spectrum. So SRF, at least as we see it, seems limited by only reimbursing a federal agency for necessary costs to update a system of quote-unquote comparable capability. So not the next level, but comparable capability. Many federal agencies have stated that the SRF limits their ability to upgrade their systems that use spectrum just to be able to continue fulfilling their missions. So, Mr. Pearl, why don't I start with you? Do you believe SRF could be reformed to better incentivize agencies to share or reallocate spectrum? Why or why not?
Yeah, and I think I would put it stronger and say that SRF must be reformed, I think, if we're going to resolve these issues.
I was trying to say that myself, but I was being generous.
But yeah, I think you identified one of the key issues, which is that agencies need to be able to receive upgrades and have more advanced systems. Some of these capabilities we're talking about could be paid for with auction funds. I think it's also necessary to give NTIA the authority to get funding in order to do studies. Right now, only the agencies can get SRF money to do studies. But as several senators have said, it's really important, and the NTIA engineers are really looking at this from an honest broker perspective and trying to get to the right answer. And so allowing them to do that would be really helpful. And then I think the last thing is that there's a technical panel under the legislation, NTIA, FCC, OMB, and they approve what the agency is going to do when they do the study, but they need more oversight of the process after that, because when things go off the rails and the study isn't going to be useful, you need that ability for the other agencies and the other engineers to weigh in and get things back on track.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Dr. Bayless, your testimony underscores how collaboration in the academic community and within government and the academic community helps enhance this Spectrum Innovation Center you lead. You see firsthand how our universities educate and create that workforce pipeline that we need to maintain our leadership in all STEM fields. Computer scientists to enhance cybersecurity of the wireless networks, radio frequency engineers to develop new technologies for sharing spectrum and getting more efficient usage. As we debate, as Congress debates how to study and share and reallocate spectrum and try to be as fair and look at the greatest good for the greatest number of people, how do you highlight the importance of ensuring that the U.S. grows a trained spectrum and cyber workforce?
Thank you. Appreciate the question. Workforce development's one of the important things we do, and I think it starts with the fact that our faculty, our staff researchers, our students that are on this project are all U.S. citizens. You won't find that in many academic centers, but we're a bunch of patriots because we want to see this country succeed and we want to see this country be the best in wireless technology. So it starts there. I think we have to develop an American pipeline of students that is going to be able to work on the future spectrum paradigm. So we've been doing a lot of efforts, one in which the National Science Foundation is currently funding, where we actually have undergraduate students from around the country apply to and get the opportunity to come to a 4-day residential workshop on one of our campuses, and we'll be holding 4 of them this summer. Actually, one in your state at Colorado State University is one of our universities, and we'll be holding one there. So you're welcome to come and check it out if you'd like.
I'll do that.
We also are involved with the Army Research Laboratory, who we've been commissioned through. We have a Smart Hub Fellows program where we actually place students at the lab working with some of our brightest minds in the laboratory and working with each other so that they can build cross-disciplinary expertise in spectrum. And we're expanding that to some other agencies now also. So we're definitely, that is a big part of bringing in the new adaptive and reconfigurable paradigm. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm kind of out of time. Mr. Clark, and I'll leave this, you can answer very, very concisely. This partnership between the federal government and the auctions around how spectrum gets divvied up. How do you look when you're evaluating spectrum used for a federal mission? How important is it for the agencies to have a meaningful and collaborative role in that feasibility study?
Right. It was really important because the physics matter. I think that fundamentally, no matter how much spectrum sharing or division of the spectrum into more efficient bands comes, you still have to deal with the physics of certain bands are going to be useful for certain operations, and you can't just move to another part of the spectrum. So physics matter, and I think that's fundamentally where it comes down to.
Thank you so much. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Senator Curtis. Constitutional structure is the president is democratically accountable to the people. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, I appreciate your commitment to working in the public interest. Let me start off with Mr. Kratsios. In your role as director of OSTP, you'll be responsible for working with various advisory bodies, the President's Council on Advisors in Science and Technology, PCAST, the National Science and Technology Council. Obviously, I am on Maslow's hierarchy of science, a geologist is near the bottom. But I am a scientist, have published peer-reviewed research, and I think it's important that we make sure that science remains impartial, objective, and nonpartisan. So we need to make sure that our scientific enterprise is examined and re-examined and continues to be modified to be more successful in those essential needs of our country. If you're confirmed, how do you commit to, or can you commit to, ensuring OSTP works with the scientific community's voice, that the scientific community is fairly represented and their voice is truly uplifted?
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. I think to me, one of the most important goals that I even mentioned in my opening statement was to ensure that the team that we build at OSTP is representative of a wide variety of scientists and technologists that support the important policy priorities of the president. So in any administration, OSTP starts with very few people on the team, and the next year is spent finding the best scientists and technologists from across your agency to bring into the White House to work with the agency. So I commit to doing that, and I think it's critically important that any policy process that is around the White House is informed by high-quality, sound science, and that is something I look forward to bringing to bear on what we do at the White House.
Great. Well, that's something we will support you on as it gets complicated, and I'm sure it will. Mr. Meador, a national privacy law would require a great amount of oversight to be able to hold businesses accountable. Sometimes these are very large businesses with immense capability. State attorneys general have experienced investigative teams that cover a range of consumer protection laws. Do you believe it's appropriate for state AGs to help the FTC enforce a federal privacy law, especially if that federal law preempts state laws? So why or why not?
Thank you, Senator. I believe that's ultimately a decision for Congress to make at the time that it would pass a federal privacy law to put structures in there governing coordination with state AGs. I can say that on the antitrust side of FTC, there's been very productive relationships between state AGs and the FTC. And so hopefully, should Congress give the agency additional powers in that area, we would see equally productive relationships there.
Right. In terms of recognizing the immense power of these very large companies and what we've seen with the social platforms and in many cases the lack of any ability of government to curtail some of the things we recognize, or some of the deep fake pornography, that's one example that comes up. How do you think we should be looking at AI on that within that same context of being able to get the market to have some balance?
Yes, that's an incredibly important topic that I think is only going to increase in prominence in the coming years. I think the first step is to view it through the lens of our existing enforcement authorities. So the FTC has the ability to police unfair and deceptive practices, and we know that AI is already being used to turbocharge many of those acts. And so it will be incumbent upon the FTC to keep a close eye on that activity to make sure we're not letting anything slip through the cracks. And should we become aware of something that we're not able to address with existing authorities, to consult with you and other members of the committee to make sure that that's resolved.
Great. And then the last thing, we talked a little bit in our office about the importance of markets being balanced, and how sometimes it's government, sometimes it's private industry, but everybody's trying to distort markets when it's to their advantage. Last week, FTC Chair Ferguson announced the agency will maintain the 2023 joint merger guidelines with the DOJ, with the Department of Justice. And these guidelines outline the criteria for the FTC to consider as it looks at mergers and acquisitions. A lot of these decisions have direct effect on the markets themselves. How can the FTC ensure we maintain fair competition in markets as we keep a forward-looking vision?
That's a great question. I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought you made several excellent points about the need to balance the prevention of anti-competitive conduct with not going too far to burdening markets with too much intervention. And I think that has to remain at the forefront of every enforcement decision that the FTC takes, looking to ensure that they're actually improving the lives of consumers when they do act, but not going so far as to micromanage the economy in any area.
All right, I appreciate that. I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations to our nominees. I'm very excited about your service and doing some good together. Mr. Kratsios, thanks for taking some time to visit with me. a number of days ago, and in that meeting we discussed the critical importance of emerging technologies to our national security.
From Colorado. Mr. President, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is, at its core, a law enforcement agency. Congress established the CFPB 15 years ago to protect Americans from fraud, from getting ripped off by banks and credit card companies, financial institutions. And today's Republican-led resolution weakens the CFPB's ability to protect consumers. And it's part of a broader effort by the administration to shut down consumer protections entirely. Now let's take a minute to go back in time to the time before the CFPB existed, right before the 2008 financial meltdown. Back then, abusive fees and misleading disclosures meant that Coloradans paid more for mortgages, more for credit cards, more for student loans. Fly-by-night lenders made massive profits by targeting vulnerable families with excessively high-cost loans, turning credit from a tool for opportunity into a tool for scams. Financial scammers could all too easily slip through the cracks in oversight. There just wasn't enough oversight. In some cases, there was no oversight. Our neighbors were getting hit with hidden fees and frauds when they took out a mortgage, when they used a credit card, if they were just paying for school. There was no cop on the beat. The result? By 2008, years of this shady, abusive practice helped spark a devastating global financial crisis. 6 million households lost their homes to foreclosure. A quarter of our families lost 75% of their wealth. Americans lost faith in our financial system. In 2010, Congress created CFPB to help make sure that this could never happen again. Congress gave it a simple job: to protect Americans from getting ripped off. The Bureau cleaned up mortgage markets, debt collection, student loans, and much, much more. It worked to protect veterans and other service members. Fast forward to today, and the CFPB's results really speak for themselves. The Bureau has delivered $20 billion, that's billion dollars with a B, back to Americans through its enforcement actions. It's brought relief to 200 million Americans and small businesses facing scams or abusive practices. In Colorado, nearly 67,000 people have sought the help from CFPB, including more than 6,200 service members. Thousands of those complaints led to relief for consumers. It really is a remarkable track record, that is, until it's been decided by Republicans that they want to eliminate many of these protections, if not all of them. This vote today would unwind protections designed for the modern financial system, for the everyday payment apps we all use like Venmo or PayPal. It would allow some of the largest financial firms in a consumer's life to stay in the shadows, to operate outside of any oversight. That's exactly the approach to consumer protection we had 20 years ago, before the CFPB, before the 2008 financial crisis. This is but the latest attempt to leave consumers vulnerable to scams. In fact, the Trump administration is trying, I think many people believe illegally, to abolish the CFPB entirely. They fired dedicated staff who protect consumers, they canceled the lease on the CFPB's office, and they literally ordered a total shutdown of the agency, an unprecedented effort to defy Congress. The administration believes that CFPB doesn't deserve to exist. And maybe they think that scammers and fraudsters have finally hung it up and have gone to find honest work. But I think the American people know better. The administration wants to take our economy back to the time before the financial crisis of 2009 with weaker protections and no one looking out for consumers. If the Trump administration gets its way, it's clear who the winners will be: loan sharks, shady mortgage companies, junk fee merchants. and the losers will be the rest of America. Any Coloradan that wants a fair deal on a credit card or on a mortgage. Bottom line, more money in the pocket of fraudsters, scammers, and the unscrupulous, less for the little guy to save. I urge my colleagues to stand up for American consumers and vote no on this resolution. I hit it and it turned itself off. Thank you for being here and for all your service. As we've already heard today, and you're already well aware of, this cap on the indirect fees for all NIH grants has been traumatic to the system. It's now on a pause. Clearly, the solution is some sort of more transparent, well thought out, fair system by which research in the center of the country, the South, the North, East, the West, is all in a level playing field. How long, let's assume that we get the legal stuff sorted out, the chaos comes down a little bit, how long would it take to create a new system like that?
Senator, I don't know that it would take a new system necessarily. I think the key thing is, as you said, Senator, the transparency, right? So audits of university spending of indirect costs would help, I think, help inform decisions. It's a complicated question. Of course, I wasn't involved in the decision about the cap, but if I'm confirmed as NIH director, that's something I'll look very carefully at. The broader problem is we have deep distrust by the American people of universities and the scientific establishment earned during the pandemic. To address that, transparency is the key way. Just as I was telling Senator Tuberville, that transparency is what will solve this problem.
We agree on that. We've been working on a project called the DeAndre Dixon Include Project Act. I think you know a little bit about it, but the idea is that we codify research activities at the NIH on co-occurring disorders of Down syndrome across multiple institutes of the NIH. And I'm not asking your endorsement, but I am asking if you'll be willing to work with us on this. We're very serious about it. And then also look at how more broadly on cross-institute work at the NIH to try and unlock new discoveries.
Senator, I'm absolutely committed to that, and I'd be delighted to work with you on that project that you just mentioned, as well as other projects. I think there's tremendous opportunities for cross-disciplinary work across the NIH. I think it's at the back of the minds of so many reform proposals at the NIH I've seen over the years to try to make sure that the NIH research doesn't stay siloed within one institute, but that it's useful for researchers all across the NIH.
Right. I want to spend a little bit of time thank you for that. I appreciate that. A moment just looking at, we've heard a lot of people suggest that somehow the NIH is allowing the United States to be taken advantage of in some ways. One fact that is striking to me that in a 10-year period, 99% of the drugs approved by the FDA were developed with research to a larger or lesser extent from NIH. Are you worried about the U.S. ability to maintain that leadership? Do you think we're being ripped off in some way? The fact that we are affluent enough and care about science enough that we are leading the world in this research, is in some way this unfair?
Senator, I think the United States is the greatest country on earth. And one of the reasons it is that it has a sincere commitment to doing fundamental research that benefits all of humanity. And I think much of the NIH research does exactly that. I don't view it as ripping off when a scientist comes up with an amazing idea that solves, that treats, diabetes better. Everyone on earth benefits from that.
Right.
So I think NIH as fundamentally an institution aimed at the public good.
So here's a more difficult question, which I've caused just to be suggestive. Do you think we're spending enough on research in terms of where you're coming in? Part of your seat is going to say, are we running out of good ideas? Is there a shortage of things that really demand our attention?
I think, that, as I outlined in my opening statement, I think there's some real problems in how the scientific establishment is operating. The replicability crisis, a lack of desire to focus on the diseases and the conditions that really are afflicting Americans, and also a sort of tentativeness to focus on the big ideas. No matter what the budget is, I want to reform it in that direction. I'm happy to work with Congress. It's Congress that decides the budgets of the NIH.
We decided based on a lot of your advice. So be thinking of that. obviously increased vaccine skepticism. We're seeing just in the past school year, the number of kindergarten kids that are exempted for one or more routine vaccinations has continued to rise, the highest levels recorded. Is this rising skepticism around vaccines, is that going to make vaccine-related research at NIH any less of a priority? And if confirmed, how you balance the need to focus on research into chronic diseases with that need to invest in research on viruses and things that a vaccine can address?
Senator, I think the increasing skepticism, which I view as a hangover from the COVID pandemic sort of overstatement about how the COVID vaccine worked, makes it more important to do vaccine research. Secretary Kennedy has already said he favors the MMR vaccine. I agree with that. I think that research, I mean, maybe I'm naive, Senator, but I believe very fundamentally that research, if it's done right, it's replicable, is so persuasive that it'll move people to take actions. And that's the philosophy I've operated under my entire career. I intend to keep doing that if I'm confirmed.
From your lips to God's ear. Thank you.
Senator Moody.
Senator, how you doing? Good. You have the shutdown deadline approaching. How do you feel about this House bill, and do you plan to vote for it?
Well, I hate the House bill. I think to have such large amounts of the budget uncommitted so that the president can do whatever he wants is exactly what we've been fighting against. That being said, if you shut down the government, the president is the person who decides what is essential. He decides what part of the government stays open. So you're actually giving him even more power. So I haven't made up my mind, but I think that the continuing resolution is awful. Really, the fact that we've gotten to this point is very frustrating and saddens me. But it does seem the lesser of two very serious evils is to go along with the CR. Shutting down the government, it's always a last resort. In this case, it's even more than that, because who knows how long it stays shut down? Who knows how long the president decides that he likes making all the decisions for the government? He's going to. You can imagine him saying, "Congress has failed. Congress can't help you. It's up to me to save everyone." And then we can't reopen government without Republicans. They're the ones who've got to put a bill on the floor. And if he tells them, "Don't do that," we happen to know for a pretty good fact that they won't do it. There's a level of obedience that we've never seen before between the White House and Congress. I think we just have to respect that. If someone reveals himself to you, believe them. Well, I think they're showing that they're going to do whatever the president says, at least so far. I mean, at some point, I really do believe that Republicans and Democrats are going to stand up and make sure that Congress maintains the power of the purse, the constitutional obligation and responsibility that we've been given. We shouldn't give up on that.
Yeah, and it sounds like if you think that a shutdown would be worse than the CR.
I think that it has certainly the potential to be far worse. That's the nightmare scenario, which I would, 6 months ago would have never believed would be possible. Now there's not too many things I can't say, he might do that.
Mm-hmm. So would it be fair to say you're leaning towards voting for the CR, or at least voting for cloture?
Yeah, I think I'm leaning in that direction. But I've gone back and forth on this thing 3 times because it is 2 horrible choices, and it's hard to imagine 2 worse choices where in either case you can envision terrible things happening, people losing funding for essential things in Colorado that people depend on. We're talking about medical situations. We're talking about veterans' jobs. We're talking about education. I mean, it's just a waterfall of horribles.
Politically, how do you think your voters would react if you guys let this go forward because you feel like you have to, but you don't really get anything in return?
We're not going to get anything in return no matter what. They drove this dump truck up to the brink, and they're daring us to tip it over, to push it over the edge, let it fall. When you get to these kinds of decisions, I think we're all better off if we worry less about, am I going to get reelected? And really, what is the right thing? What is the best thing for the country, given that there's no good decision, no good choice?
Speaking of reelection, have you decided if you're going to run yet?
Yeah, I'm already out there having started run, although now I'm having second thoughts watching all my fellow senators, stepping back and having, for the last 2 months, I've started fundraising. It's a pain in the neck, right? I mean, actually, it's worse than that. It's a pain in the ass. But I'm looking forward to the campaign, and I'm looking forward to re-election.
But you're running.
I'm running, and I think that just when things look the worst, oftentimes, usually through providence, good things come. I mean, life generally is a pendulum, and I want to be ready when things start getting better. I want to be here and be part of Congress when it works, when it actually there's bipartisan compromises where we actually deal with some of the big challenges and we're not just kicking everything down the field.
Fair enough. Thanks for your time.
Senator Justice, we'll go now to 5 minutes to Senator Hickenlooper. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here, Mr. Briggs, Mr. Mulligan. Appreciate your willingness to enter service. I'll start with you, Mr. Briggs, that Congress created the SBA in the law so that it could promote access to capital for small businesses. When I was governor, in a different lifetime, we did what we call the bottom-up economic development plan, but one of the 5 main things that literally every part of the state said is we need better access to capital. And I think that's why Congress appropriates money to SBA programs, is to get access to capital. In the last few months, we've seen the President administration try to defy Congress and restrain those funds again and again. It's frozen money that Congress appropriated, and really tried to shut down whole agencies that we had created through law. And I just am worried that that funding for small businesses is going to disappear if we're not on top of it. So I want to make sure that you're willing to do everything you can to running the SBA in line with the law, including appropriations, as Congress intended.
Senator Hickenlooper, thank you for the question. If confirmed by the Senate, I will uphold the law in a fair and impartial manner.
Okay, well, I'll take that as a yes then. Mr. Mulligan, small business owners often face a range of challenges and barriers and stuff that until you've done it. I mean, it took me almost 2 years to raise the money to open my first restaurant. But those barriers change over time, they evolve, and I think it's important that we stay on top of this evolving small business landscape and make sure that we're understanding that trends like AI, changes in the lending market, that we're recognizing how they affect entrepreneurs, how they change the access to capital. So in your view, what developments in the small business environment should we be focusing on trying to understand better? How would you use the Office of Advocacy to make sure that Congress and the SBA stay informed?
Thank you for your question. I agree with you 100%. The small business economy changes pretty fast, and it's been changing fast in recent times. And that means the data we had before is obsolete. And you really want to get access to new data that reflects the current situation. You mentioned AI, I think, is a factor. Different types of employment relationships are evolving over time. And one of the great things about the Office of Advocacy is even before there was a Regulatory Flexibility Act, Congress understood this issue of measurement, and they created the office to have an Office of Economic Research and do measurement. I think a lot of the members, even to this day, are relying on the small business numbers that come from the office. And it would be a huge priority, not just because I've been an economic researcher for so many years, but be a huge priority for me to make sure the statistics are the best and up to date and reflect the current situation.
I could not agree more. I think that I tell my staff all the time is information is power. And the more we share that power with where people can put it to use, like small business entrepreneurs, the better off we are. Mr. Briggs, small businesses in Indian country face unique challenges, and that's no surprise. The landscape is, in many cases, more challenging in a variety of ways. Last Congress, we worked with senators on both sides of the aisle to create a bill that would codify the SBA's Office of Native American Affairs. That bill came out of this committee with 18-1 vote. If you're confirmed, are you willing to commit to doing everything you can, or to aggressively try to see if we make sure that the Office of Native American Affairs has the resources it needs to try and support Indian entrepreneurs who oftentimes have far more difficult access to capital than anyone else?
Senator, thank you for the question. I'm aware of the challenges facing the Native American community. My sister lives in New Mexico and has worked on a reservation in Taos, New Mexico, and has told me of the challenges facing that particular community. I commit to certainly looking at this legislation and working with your office and the full committee on this issue as part of, if I'm confirmed by the Senate.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I think in so many ways, the SBA is that bastion, that place where entrepreneurs can turn. Usually, with all due respect to the SBA, you have to have a little bit of capital, a little bit of momentum before the SBA will even answer your call. But once you get to that point, the SBA can provide solutions and resources to people that when they get that access, and I remember when we first got our 7A loan, and it transformed our business in ways that, I mean, take hours to explain. So anyway, I tremendously respect both of you for your effort to come and help small businesses. They are, without question, the core of our economy. Thank you. Yield back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Justice. We'll go now to 5 minutes to Senator Hickenlooper. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here, Mr. Briggs, Mr. Mulligan. Appreciate your willingness to enter service. I'll start with you, Mr. Briggs, that Congress created the SBA in the law so that it could promote access to capital for small businesses. When I was governor, in a different lifetime, we did what we called the bottom-up economic development plan, but one of the 5 main things that literally every part of the state said is we need better access to capital. And I think that's why Congress appropriates money to SBA programs, is to get access to capital. In the last few months, we've seen the President administration try to defy Congress and restrain those funds again and again. It's frozen money that Congress appropriated and really tried to shut down whole agencies that we had created through law. And I just am worried that that funding for small businesses is going to disappear if we're not on top of it. So I want to make sure that you're willing to do everything you can to running the SBA in line with the law, including appropriations, as Congress intended.
Senator Hickenlooper, thank you for the question. If confirmed by the Senate, I will uphold the law in a fair and impartial manner.
Okay, well, I'll take that as a yes then. Mr. Mulligan, small business owners often face a range of challenges and barriers and stuff that until you've done it. I mean, it took me almost 2 years to raise the money to open my first restaurant. But those barriers change over time, they evolve, and I think it's important that we stay on top of this evolving small business landscape and make sure that we're understanding that trends like AI, changes in the lending market, that we're recognizing how they affect entrepreneurs, how they change the access to capital. So in your view, what developments in the small business environment should we be focusing on trying to understand better? How would you use the Office of Advocacy to make sure that Congress and the SBA stay informed?
Thank you for your question. I agree with you 100%. The small business economy changes pretty fast, and it's been changing fast in recent times. And that means the data we had before is obsolete. And you really want to get access to new data that reflects the current situation. You mentioned AI, I think, is a factor. Different types of employment relationships are evolving over time. And one of the great things about the Office of Advocacy is even before there was a Regulatory Flexibility Act, Congress understood this issue of measurement, and they created the office to have an Office of Economic Research and do measurement. I think a lot of the members, even to this day, are relying on the small business numbers that come from the office. And it would be a huge priority, not just because I've been an economic researcher for so many years, but be a huge priority for me to make sure the statistics are the best and up to date and reflect the current situation.
I could not agree more. And I think that what I tell my staff all the time is information is power. And the more we share that power with where people can put it to use, like small business entrepreneurs, the better off we are. Mr. Briggs, small businesses in Indian country face unique challenges, and that's no surprise. The landscape is, in many cases, more challenging in a variety of ways. Last Congress, we worked with senators on both sides of the aisle to create a bill that would codify the SBA's Office of Native American Affairs. That bill came out of this committee with 18-1 vote. If you're confirmed, are you willing to commit to doing everything you can, or to aggressively try to see if we make sure that the Office of Native American Affairs has the resources it needs to try and support Indian entrepreneurs who oftentimes have far more difficult access to capital than anyone else?
Senator, thank you for the question. I'm aware of the challenges facing the Native American community. My sister lives in New Mexico and has worked on a reservation in Taos, New Mexico, and has told me of the challenges facing that particular community. I commit to certainly looking at this legislation and working with your office and the full committee on this issue as part of, if I'm confirmed by the Senate.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I think in so many ways, the SBA is that bastion, that place where entrepreneurs can turn. Usually, with all due respect to the SBA, you have to have a little bit of capital, a little bit of momentum before the SBA will even answer your call. But once you get to that point, the SBA can provide solutions and resources to people that, when they get that access, and I remember when we first got our 7A loan, and it transformed our business in ways that, I mean, take hours to explain. So anyway, I tremendously respect both of you for your effort to come and help small businesses. They are, without question, the core of our economy. Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you very much.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Russo, you earlier testified that you've looked at the places, the airports with higher volumes of mixed traffic. I think you mentioned Boston, Dallas, Anchorage. Is that assessment, have you gone through all the airports? I mean, does that mean that other airports in other large cities, or where we have a fair amount of mixed traffic, are okay?
Good job, thank you. So we have 10 locations, a total of 21 airports. So we are doing this hotspot review, this mixed traffic review across the nation, including in the Anchorage area. So we're reviewing all the airspace designs to see where we may have this indicator of risk with mixed traffic, so helicopter operations as well as fixed wing.
And so you mentioned Boston, Dallas, and Anchorage. That's not the full list, I assume.
That's correct, sir.
And so when will this be done?
So obviously, 21 locations, I'm receiving regular updates. I anticipate that being, I anticipate that activity being concluded in the next couple weeks. I will tell you that our teams they're being very intentional about how they go through that airspace, because it's been built over time as it relates to helicopter routes and other approaches and departure routes. So we're being very intentional, very careful. We don't want to move quickly with inducing additional risk.
Right, I understand that, but obviously time is of the essence.
Yes,
when
sir.
you're in a situation like this, making sure that even a preliminary warning as part of that assessment would be pretty valuable.
And any indicator that there's an emerging risk, we would take immediate action.
Ms. Hamady, you have in the past talked about workforce and making sure that you are fully staffed. And I think this is a direct follow-up on that. Are we fully staffed? I mean, you're going to look at this entire incident, and it's going to take the typical year and a half or 2 years, which, again, drives a lot of my constituents crazy. Do you have a timeline for when you will finish the full incident report, or whatever the legal description is, when that will happen?
We've committed to 1 year, barring any unforeseen circumstances, but 1 year.
And so you have enough staffing on that?
We have 40 experts at the NTSB that are currently leading this investigation. It is a high workload because it's not their only investigation that they're focused on, but they're very committed to this one. And then we have an entire agency that supports them.
Right. We saw we have a array of past reports, and it varies dramatically, but I appreciate the fact that you're trying to accelerate this. I think it frustrates a lot of people that it takes, so long. I mean, how long does it take to gather the facts?
So, I mean, it is a complex investigations, and our investigations are very broad. And there's a lot of information that can change over time, and we are very fact-based, following the evidence. So we do, that's our credibility, so we want to be exact when we issue something. I will say, I do have to congratulate our workforce, because when I came on as chair, we had well over 400, close to 500 reports that were 2, 3, 4 years old, and they're now below 2.
Right.
So that is significant, but the complexity of investigations, and then the fact that some things we don't have control over, like if we can't get access to evidence because a district attorney or law enforcement is prohibiting us in a certain situation with a highway crash, that can extend the timeline.
Sure. No, I've seen that. But I think in something like this, where time is of the essence, I
Yes.
appreciate you guys
Agreed.
making the effort, and glad to hear that you have the workforce. Mr. Rushlow, in your testimony, you highlighted some of the recent changes in hiring, and also especially in the training processes, to make sure we have more qualified air traffic controllers, but full workforce. I know you're working with local colleges all over the country on that. Is that is that working? I mean, I think if we can accelerate that, we have Metro State in Denver is a place where we're turning out some of these members. Is that something you can ramp up?
I'm very interested, and the Secretary has been very clear with the public as well as with me that we need to surge this hiring and do it well. Again, back to the testing, the surge, bringing people in. As it relates to additional college initiatives, we have an enhanced college training initiative, ECTIs, that we're using in, I believe, 4 universities right now. We're working with them with respect to advanced simulators and the like to make sure that we can get more, what we'll call throughput, but more controllers through those schools and get them out to the local facilities, centers, towers, TRACONs.
Great. I'm out of time. Yield back to the chair. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Roth. Appreciate the time you spent carved out for us in the office. Let's start with the Spectrum Relocation Fund, the SRF. Provides funding to the federal government to research the feasibility of modifying and, if necessary, upgrading federal systems that use spectrum, but it's limited to only reimbursing a federal agency for necessary costs to update a system of quote-unquote comparable capability. Now, many federal agencies have stated that SRF limits their ability to upgrade their systems that use spectrum and continue fulfilling their missions. So, Ms. Roth, do you believe that SRF could be reformed to better incentivize agencies to share or reallocate spectrum? So why or why not?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for meeting with me in your office. I think we should be trying to find efficiencies where possible, consistent with national security. And I'm aware of debates over SRF and how to make it more effective. I would be an honor to work with your office on this issue.
Great. Well, I think that's something we're eager to do, and I appreciate your openness to that. My chance to talk about BEAD, as we all do, and we talked about a little bit in the office. Obviously, many projects, but broadband especially, saw significant investments from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I think we believe that improvements can be made that maintain the community input, but improve the permitting process. Again, like we've heard from various of us moving things along. What's your view on how NTIA can help states address permitting issues that may come up as BEAD projects begin construction? As you're aware, Colorado's kind of a model child in that sense that we have satellite, we have fiber, and then we have normal cell towers.
Thank you, Senator. As I said, expediting the program and specifically expediting build-out would be my priority if confirmed. And permitting is certainly one thing that I would want to look at as a potential solution to expediting the build-out side. It can also make the deployment of broadband less costly, and that's what we want, is to get the best bang for the taxpayers buck so that our dollars are stretched as far as possible so that we can deliver broadband to all Americans in an expeditious and efficient manner.
I think that's exactly the right approach, and there is certainly a backlog and it's a little bit like watching the mongoose going through the python. It's kind of blocked up for a while, but now hopefully it'll start going very, very quickly and get that money spent wisely. Again, back to spectrum and a little bit about interagency coordination. Many would argue that there's always room for improvement when federal agencies are trying to work together. It's not a natural condition of the species. In recent years, the FCC and the NTIA updated a memorandum of understanding that goes all the way back. It was first signed in 2003. Goes all the way back relative to planning and coordination of spectrum. What are your plans, or how do you see us doing the best job to maintain close communications with the FCC to ensure that these spectrum decisions are evidence-based and will hold up over the long term?
Thank you, Senator. NTIA has historically maintained a close relationship with the FCC. That's something I would certainly want to continue if I'm fortunate to be confirmed as NTIA administrator. And part of that would be certainly if reviewing the memorandum of understanding, if there's improvements to be made in NTIA and FCC's coordination, it's something I would be honored to work on.
Great. And then one last question, which you won't be able to answer completely, but I think relative to your position, assuming that you are confirmed to the NTIA, there's a rising tide of issues around AI and AI development, the data center growth, how that affects energy demand. How would you position NTIA to help facilitate resolution of those challenges?
Thank you, Senator. AI is very important, and America's leadership in AI is very important, so that to ensure that we remain the global leader in AI and don't cede that leadership to our adversaries. I think one way to advance that is through expanding spectrum access and finding efficiencies, because AI is going to place increased demand on our networks, and so any efficiencies that we can find are consistent with national security will, in the long run, protect our country and our global technology leadership.
Great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate how concise your answers are. If you can run the agency that concisely, there'll be good things ahead. Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Roth, good to see you, and congratulations on your nomination to serve as the Assistant Secretary. And it's nice to see that your family is...
Time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Beyer, obviously Coloradans support conservation and protection for our public lands, like most states. These lands boost the $17 billion recreation economy, not to mention all the wildlife and watershed benefits that accrue. You're nominated for a role that would oversee the Bureau of Land Management, which manages lands for multiple processes or uses. You're certainly experienced in the oil and gas side of things, but you're also going to have to transition to a broader lens now and look at making sure that we ensure healthy lands, diversity of landscapes, reliable access to outdoor recreation. Will you work with us to make sure that we maintain these approaches to conservation and protection of our public lands?
Senator, I appreciate you pointing that out, and absolutely I agree with you and commit to working with you on that.
Great, thank you. Mr. Garish, nuclear energy could play a huge role in our national security, and I share the frustration of many organizations, Nuclear Energy Institute, the Colorado Nuclear Alliance, Nuclear Innovation Alliance, that the DOE has let go more than half its staff at the Loan Program Office. The Loan Program Office, LPO, one of the most effective federal offices supporting new nuclear projects in the United States. how is the administration, from your perspective, plan to expand domestic nuclear energy while simultaneously dramatically reducing the staff that would be most critical for that expansion?
Well, I am hopeful that as applications come into LPO for additional nuclear projects, that there is sufficient staff to handle them, and I see no reason that currently, and I'm not totally familiar with the staff situation in LPO, but I anticipate that we will have the staff to handle that.
So if you find there's insufficient staff, you will raise your voice and say, we need more staff.
Indeed.
Good. Good to hear that. Dr. Travnik, the Department of Interior recently announced some of the emergency permitting procedures to accelerate the development of domestic resources, critical minerals. As has been noted, this initiative seeks to reduce multi-year review processes to, well, as much as possible, but in some cases as quickly as 28 days. I'm an outspoken, I guess I'd say, supporter of bipartisan permitting reform. I emphasize bipartisan permitting reform. But I am concerned about some of these drastic actions. What are the litigation risks of taking such dramatic steps to accelerate these timelines without an act of Congress? In other words, aren't we creating far more obstacles and problems in the future than we as we seek to circumvent the existing structure? And then how do you justify operating under a national energy emergency while excluding key technologies like solar, wind, energy storage from these new permitting procedures?
Senator, thank you for the question. Yes, we have been directed through the presidential order in regards to the energy emergency that we see here in this country. I know that this committee has been active as it relates to finding ways to streamline the permitting processes. The team at Interior has been working very hard to try to see if there's any ways to streamline them even further. And that's where you did see this last week, where there was a new permitting process that was rolled out to try to expedite that, to make sure that we can develop the resources, also get the infrastructure needed to make sure that we're getting that clear energy dominance. At the same time, it also is looking at just ESA, NHPA. I know there was a question earlier also too related to tribes. So the department's going to work really hard to implement that.
Great, thank you. And I'll ask you each, just there have been some, I think in some quarters, serious discussions about large-scale sales of public lands for the generation of revenue for the federal government. I just wanted to ask each of you to give your authentic opinion as to whether that's a worthy outcome. And I'm a great believer in budgets and frugality, but I think wide-scale sale of public lands just for the generation of revenue seems very ill-advised. I just want to hear each of your opinion on that.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. We know as it relates to federal lands, there's a lot of multi-use efforts that are associated with them.
I'm just talking about the sale. So I understand multi-use, and I understand that. And in some mountain towns, you can sell an acre or two from the BLM that they can use for affordable housing or workforce housing. I get that. I'm not against that. I'm talking about larger scale sale of public lands to generate revenue, solely to generate revenue for the federal government.
Yes, and at the Department of the Interior right now, we do have a directive through an executive order to review all of those public lands, seeing if there are any opportunities. So it would be working with the states, looking for opportunities to see if there is any opportunity.
So you're okay with that, all right?
Senator, Congress has the authority to dispose of public lands, and I agree with my colleague. From the Interior perspective, we would look to the states, any state looking to do a lands transfer.
So you said Congress has the authority, but then you're going to look to the states. So look to the states to advise Congress. That's the question. I'm not trying to be a trouble. I'm just trying to make sure we get out.
I understand, sir. I meant that in the context of, I'm sure there is a role for the Department of Interior. I do not currently work in the building, but my understanding of the Constitution is that it gives that authority to Congress.
Right, we agree. Mr. Garish.
Senator, I'm not familiar enough with this subject to be able to provide much of an opinion. However, it would seem to me that, as I understand it, that this is a matter for Congress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I appreciate the issue that you raised as the nominee for the EIA administrator position, which is policy neutral. I unfortunately am not able to respond.
All right, thank you. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, is this something on? I guess it's on enough. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for being here. Thank you for your willingness to go deeper into public service. You have experience with companies that are focused on age-related diseases and conditions, Alzheimer's being prominent. And certainly I share that interest and have been particularly interested in some of the research around sugar and ultra-processed foods that could be connected to dementia, different types of dementia in later life. As you may know, the Trump administration's NIH funding cuts and delays have led to a large amount of confusion. Some would call it chaos, particularly at the Alzheimer's disease research centers. And I mean, let's put it this way. Are you still interested in further research and understanding into the causes of and possible treatments of Alzheimer's? And if so, will you figure out some way to restore funding to the Alzheimer's disease research projects being done at NIH?
Senator, that does absolutely remain an interest. There are multiple causes of dementia. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and Lewy bodies are perhaps the three most well-known. There could be others. There could be others that we don't know about. I think it's an open scientific question of how much we should focus research money more downstream, specifically Alzheimer's for these dollars, specifically Parkinson's for these dollars, specifically Lewy bodies for these dollars, and versus how much we should focus research dollars more upstream on what potential common factors and common causes all kinds of dementia and all kinds of aging damage has. I don't have a specific answer for that, but it is an area of like intellectual and operational interest for me, and I would love to engage in that.
Good. Glad to hear that. In Colorado and in a lot of states, we worked hard to make access to green spaces and natural outdoor environments, recreational opportunities. It was both an economic priority for outdoor recreation, is a big part of most of the Western states. I'd say all the Western states, but also as a public health benefit, and making sure that those who work in outdoor spaces are safe, I think, is a responsibility for all of us and for the federal government. Nearly all the workers at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health have been laid off, equally at that office, the same office in Denver. The office in Denver specifically focused on occupational health hazards experienced often uniquely in the West, such as wildfire. If you're fighting wildfires, what does that particulate and all those noxious smoke and fumes that you inhale, what are the consequences of that? If you're confirmed, Mr. O'Neill, how will you prioritize occupational safety and health, particularly in the West, with a severely feebled staff? In other words, the federal office has been not quite just destroyed, but significantly reduced.
Thank you, Senator. That is a huge concern. As someone who's lived in Marin County, California for the last 14 years, I've had a lot of negative experience with smoke from wildfires. Stocked up on N95 masks before the COVID pandemic. Recall trying to understand the distinction between the N95 masks that were approved by FDA versus the ones that were approved by NIOSH. They seem very similar. I think they are pretty similar. Of course, it's important that all parts of government, including state governments, do their best to prevent wildfires and respond to them. And HHS, of course, has a role.
I'm fine with that. I guess my question is really, are you going to fight like hell to make sure you get enough funding so you can do that some of that basic research, because it is ongoing and critical. Last question, and then I'll let you go. As you know, the National Institutes of Health are the largest funders of biomedical research on Earth. Basic research often informs the next big discovery, often done in-house at NIH. Many biomedical companies are not incentivized to do this nuts and bolts research that translates into the big deal. And yet we all depend on that research. So if confirmed as Deputy Secretary, how are you going to incentivize private companies and institutions to conduct research that historically they have depended on NIH for, but now are going to have to do on their own?
I think I agree with the whole premise of your question very strongly, Senator. Companies have a financial incentive to do late-stage translational research. They don't have an incentive to do basic research, which is also harder to patent. It's important that NIH do very extensive basic research because almost no one else will.
You're going to have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
I yield.
Mr. O'Neill, just a follow-up. In my question, I asked regarding there's a current effective mandate of CDC. If somebody wishes to become a permanent resident of the United States legally, it is effectively mandated that they receive vaccines. Knowing your opposition to mandates, would you attempt to rescind that?
Senator, I share a concern about either legal immigrants or illegal immigrants coming into the country with an infectious disease or without recommended vaccinations. I've not had a chance to discuss. I've been focused on most of the vaccine questions on rules for citizens and advice to citizens. I haven't had a chance to discuss rules for illegal immigrants with the Secretary, but I would be happy, if confirmed, to dig in on that issue.
Well, I will have that as my a question for the record, if you could respond to that before next week. And for any other senator wishing to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due at 5 p.m. tomorrow, May 9th. Thank you again to Mr. O'Neill for being here. The committee stands adjourned. Thank you.
Chair.
Great. Thank you, Senator Hawley. And I'll go to Mr. Michelson. We'll start with you. And Mr. Michelson, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, so sorry.
I must
Senator
look like
Hickenlooper.
I must look like the wallpaper.
I missed you. Okay, I got caught up there with Senator Rosen and totally overlooked you. I apologize. My apologies to you, Senator Hickenlooper. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Let me start, Mr. Mickelson. The SBIC we've been talking about obviously is a cornerstone of so much what the SBA does. As a small business person myself, I'd gotten laid off, was out of work for a couple of years, and took a long time to raise the money. As I always would say, my mother wouldn't invest, and she wouldn't. I think those private investments, with coming through the SBIC, can really bring, well, it certainly has brought hundreds of millions of dollars into Colorado. And I've been working with Senator Marshall to further build on that success. I'm sure you're aware of all of the America Act. So in terms of your firm operating the SBIC, how would expanding that program broaden access for capital to what are popularly called underserved, to lower income communities?
Thank you, Senator, for your question. It's timely. We actually closed an investment in Colorado last week. So from an SBIC, so your timing's perfect. But certainly the passage of the Investing in All of America Act, which I know you introduced last Congress, and hopefully it'll get through this Congress, will increase funding to the SBIC program, so there will be more opportunities for investment like the one we did last week in Colorado. It will also specifically target rural and low-income areas, and so Midwest Growth Partners invests in rural areas, so that would give groups like us more opportunities to make those investments. And then finally, it would provide bonus leverage for manufacturers. And so we've talked a lot about the importance of manufacturing. Right now, 20% of dollars from SBICs roughly go into manufacturers. And so with some bonus leverage, we would expect that number to go higher because there'd be more capital available. And so
great. It's okay. You covered it well. I spent a lot of time in West Des Moines, and as an entrepreneur, when I branched out, one of our brew pubs that we opened was in downtown Des Moines, but it was the Raccoon River Brewing Company in the old Hotel Fort Des Moines.
It's a great spot.
I probably know a number of your personal investors. I got them to help invest in that.
Perfect.
Ms. Robbins, let me ask you a question. The tariff situation, obviously, as somebody I can remember every little bit, when you're a truly small business, every little bit makes a difference. And I think tariffs went up, then they've been suspended, now it's 3 months. That uncertainty is chaos. I know how hard that is. How have you guys navigated the uncertainty around the tariff issue, and how to make your planning of when do you make infrastructure investments, and how do you assess that? How are you able to grow?
Thank you so much for your question, Senator. We're not able to grow under the tariffs. The tariffs have created complete uncertainty. They're changing from week to week. You mentioned, that they announced a reduced tariff rate and a 90-day pause, but I'm still not clear on exactly how much I'm paying in tariffs. Is it 30% plus the 2018 plus the fentanyl? That would put me at 75%. That's still huge. Yes, we do. We count every penny, and I used to be a financial planner, and as a business, we're planning a year out easily. And now I don't know what's happening next week and 3 months, and it's impossible to navigate these circumstances. Right. So, we had forecast a price increase. Things had been the same for 2 weeks. We were going to roll it out, and now the tariffs have changed, so we're going to hold on to that. I also know that my customers have been loading in on foreign imports. My customers are retail stores.
Right.
They've been loading in on foreign imports during this reduced tariff pause because they're speculating that it's going to go back up. Yep. So just another way this is backfiring and hurting U.S. small businesses.
Right.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. And I love the name Earthquaker. I was an old geologist, and the Colorado School of Mines has an earthquake center, and you can get a live feed to see anywhere in the world when a quake happens. And you ought to stick one of those in your retail sales or your wholesale sales office. Mr. Riley, and again, a safer bike. Was a huge bike fan, a huge believer in outdoor recreation. It's a business. It creates jobs, but it also makes people healthy. It makes people feel healthy. I mean, it changes their mental health issues. You had a unique journey. Somehow Mark Cuban never, took the time to let me appear on his TV show. I'm not sure what he was doing back when I was trying to raise money. What other suggestions would you give to small business owners who are trying to find capital and to, invest in domestic manufacturing?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. I was very lucky to have the opportunity to go on the show Shark Tank, and got an investment from Mark Cuban. But I think the statistics were something like 80,000 people every year apply to go on the show, and something like 50 or 60 actually get on a season. So I still pinch myself that actually happened for me. But I would say, for just general advice for small businesses, I think what we've done is try to create a U.S. factory, reshore production, but really make that a strategic advantage for us, and not have it really be all about a tariff advantage, but actually an inventory advantage, a way that we can, set up the bikes in a really safe way. The whole brand is built around safe bikes, so a bike is only as safe as it's set up. You set up the brakes, you set up, every fastener to a certain torque. So really kind of, telling, for somebody like us, telling that story to investors and getting investors excited about the strategic advantages of building a product in the United States that are over and above just, tariffs, or whether it's going to be a price advantage and these things. That was a really big thing for us, and we were able to secure capital, not only from Mark Cuban on the show, but from a group of just individual investors.
You get a ripple effect. And that's perfect advice. You're exactly right. They've got to take the advantage you have, and then use that to go out and compete.
Yep.
I'm out of time, or else but anyway, I yield back to the chair.
Do you have another question, Senator Hickenlooper? Okay.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking the time and for your willingness to come into the public sector. I'm not going to try and play gotcha. But it is an opportunity to spend a little bit of philosophical time. And I guess one question is, do you think our country spends too much on scientific research?
No.
Okay. And so, obviously, the NIH is the largest in terms of biomedical research. There's the Howard Hughes Institute, but the
70% of the world.
Exactly, 70% of the world. And I guess when you look at the level of cuts that we're facing over there, and I recognize that a lot of these cuts are imposed upon you. So, but there's there's a gap in basic fundamental research that's going to have to be filled somehow. And have you got any ideas of how we can do that, given the scale, the dimension of the lawsuit we're facing?
Well, first of all, my job is to support the president on this and to support OMB. But, the reality is that, as I've said, no agency head wants to see cuts to his agency. And I love scientific research, so I want to do as much as possible. But I think because of we are very, very aggressively implementing AI, and I think we're going to do it faster and better than anybody else in government, any other agency. We brought very, very high quality caliber people from Silicon Valley.
And I get that, and that will accelerate and help us do more.
That's probably, we can shorten clinical trials. We can get rid of animal trials, which we're already doing.
I'm in support of all that. We talked about that for years.
And we can do, and we can now digitalize.
Research I'm talking about is not that so much as the fundamental scientific, basic science research.
Like bench science or epidemiological studies or whatever. And I think we can do a lot of that stuff quicker. I'll take as much money as you give me, and I'll spend it well.
Well, I just want to make sure to urge you to be a fighter for more of that research, because there's a questioning of science right now within many in the White House, not everyone, but many in the White House. It really needs to be pushed back. And Senator Hawley, I'll sign on to that bill as well. Second question I've got, we have a lot of issues around wildfires in Colorado right now, and this is back to the NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety Health. That you mentioned that they kept them in Cleveland and I think somewhere in Pennsylvania. Pretty much everyone's laid off in Colorado.
In Morgantown, yeah.
Yeah, everyone's laid off in Colorado, and that the question really, and I think a couple have been ordered to be reinstated, but all the West is dealing with these, thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people out fighting fires. These are people risking their lives, walking away from their families every day. And the basic research that needs to be done, I don't think the replacements are going to be, in many cases, they're new onto the job. They're not going to be sufficient to address and really make sure the specific health needs of these workers, these outdoor workers, are addressed. So the question is, how can you make sure that folks in Colorado, like firefighters, are able to do their jobs safely?
I think a lot of the cuts that we're implementing now are painful cuts, and that they, they're cuts that are going to be difficult. But I think the president's position is that we're spending $2 trillion that we don't have, that we are taking from our children. And we've got to protect their rights to prosperity, to enrichment, to dignity, to choice. And, so.
I've heard that argument, and I appreciate it. And I'm a voice of frugality, at least in my office, and try to push it around the Senate where it's allowed. But we're looking at budgets that's going to increase the deficit by who knows how much, $4 to $5 trillion, to take things like this that we know are successful, and not just for Colorado, but for almost every Western state essential. And you're saving such a small amount of money for something that's so important. I just hope that you can push back on that a little bit, and someone's got to take a stand for these things that are minor financial benefits, but significant losses to how we provide safety for workers and our citizens.
I'm happy to work with you on that, Senator.
Okay, great. I yield back to the chair.
Next, we will move to Senator Hickenlooper for 5 minutes of questions. So you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As someone I was a small business person, I had an SBA loan. What is the average length of process for a loan? So when I did it, it took about a year, 11 and a half months. My understanding is it takes about 8 to 12 months now.
Senator, first of all, thank you for your leadership in small businesses. I commend all of our small business leaders for what they do for Main Streets. I will say that the loan process has improved because we've re-strengthened the SOP back to what it was, making it more predictable for our lenders.
No, I get that, and I admire that, and I admit that, but you're giving us statistics of the first 100 days and saying you've given all these loans got completed. Those loans were all started under Biden. And if you look at Biden's first 100 days, those loans were all started by President Trump in his previous administration. So to say that they're up 80% is flipped. In other words, what those loans take at least 6 months to close. So you're closing loans that were started by Biden, and he was trying to close loans at a lower number that were started under Trump.
But these are actually based on closings. No small business would close on a loan that they didn't believe that could invest and grow in their business. So the closing rate during the term is incredibly important. It's a vote of confidence. No small business is going to take out a loan if they don't believe the conditions would support its improvement.
The number of
That's why we're here today,
closings,
is to
and
talk
I
about
appreciate that, but the
expanding
number of closings is based on how much work has gotten, how many you've got in the pipeline. And that all happened in the previous administration. I worry also, like Senator Markey, in terms of the cost of tariffs to small business. All I hear about when I'm in Colorado is that they can't find, it's not just the components of what they're putting together, their entire supply chain is at risk. And again, raising the caps on the 7A, I think that's a great thing, but that mostly helps larger small businesses. The little guys are struggling. It took me 4 years before I was able to qualify for an SBA loan. We've got a lot of outdoor recreation industry in Colorado. It's really all across the country now. It's a $1.2 trillion industry. And they're kind of freaking out. If you look at the running, hiking, hunting, fishing, boating, kayaking, you know, so much of that industry, and it's a very broad industry, but a lot of it is apparel and footwear. And when you talk to almost every one of them, they are largely manufactured in Asia, not so much in China anymore. They're manufactured in Vietnam and Cambodia and Bangladesh. I mean, people have been moving away from China like crazy over the last number of years, last 6 or 8 years. The margins are too thin to really genuinely imagine we're going to bring back both the supply chain and the actual manufacturing in the United States. The margins are paper thin, and it seems like a more useful thing to do would be to work with the Caribbean, you know, what they call CAFTA, but it's the trade association in the Caribbean, or with either Mexico or Canada, more likely Mexico, for some of this, you know, footwear and apparel. Is that something you see in the future?
Senator, what I see in the future is advocating for American jobs and American industry, which is exactly what President Trump is doing. This is why small towns like I'm from, a town of 600, have been hollowed out because of the loss of manufacturing. You may not think a job making socks is a good job. I just met a manufacturer last night at a small business roundtable. They love their job. They love their factory. It's a small factory. They do great things. It's textiles made in America. We have microchips being made in America now. We can make things in America, and this narrative that we can't make things here affordably is absolutely demonstrably false, and it's not about big manufacturers. I've been to great manufacturers with less than 50 employees who will benefit from this upsized loan program.
No, I get it. I am a small business person. I am born of that ilk, and I am part of that ilk. But everyone I talk to is in a state of terror that they feel they will not be able to get through this whatever is 18 months. It could be 2 years, 4 years. When you're looking at, even if we go to a 10% tariff, for truly small businesses, that is an unsupportable burden. It puts their entire business at risk. It's something they've, in many cases, have worked their whole lives to get the opportunity to start and to create, and now suddenly they're going to get the rug pulled out from under them for something they have no control over. And I'm not sure I see the benefit of that 10% tariff, which essentially it's got to be paid in raising prices or lowering your sales. You're just going to have to raise enough prices and accept the fact you're going to have those lower sales. In either case, the public's going to pay for it one way or another, either have less things to buy or a higher cost. And to what purpose, right? To do a big tax cut? I'm not sure. I don't see the benefit.
Senator,
Thank you. If you'd like to respond, Administrator.
our small businesses have been the victims of unfair trade policy for decades. They have had to compete against unfair non-tariff and tariff trade barriers. We have to level the playing field. It's absolutely fair to them. But the number one thing I hear right now is small businesses need Congress to pass this tax reform, this tax cut bill. And that is the number one thing, small businesses. That would be an immediate tax increase that would raise taxes on small businesses higher than what small businesses in China pay the Chinese Communist Party. So that is the number one thing I hear. I understand there are short-term impacts during this critical period of negotiation with 75 countries that is going to make trading fair for all, and these small manufacturers are delighted that they're finally going to be able to compete on a level playing field.
Okay, thank you, Senator Hickenlooper, and thank you for mentioning socks. We do make socks in one of my very small rural Iowa towns in
We have a
northeast
sock
Iowa.
manufacturer
Do you
in
have a
Colorado,
sock
as a matter of
manufacturer?
fact. Smart Wool.
Love it. Thank
Smart
you.
War. Smart
Sock
Wool.
wars.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank all of you for your work on behalf of the future generations of this country. I want to ask a couple different questions, and maybe I'll go down the list. At one time, or various times, there's been talk of a website that would actually allow prospective students to see of any university, or as best estimated it could be, and there'll be a large battle over this, what kind of earnings they could achieve based on what they studied. And these are averages, and I think there would have to be qualifications on that. So I want to ask each of you just to very briefly kind of give a thumbs up or what's a real concern about that. I recognize the limitations. And then tied into that, there's also from time to time been efforts to allow students future loans to be able to declare bankruptcy. What would happen if you took away that right that lenders are looking for to make sure that they can get paid back? And obviously you would probably decrease access. I recognize that, but I postulate those two questions. What about the website that to the best ability tries to give prospective students a vision of what they can earn in the future? Why don't you start down at the end with you, Mr. Gillen?
Yeah, so I think that's a great idea. We do have an early version of this. It's the College Scorecard website. You can look up by college and major what the earnings of graduates are. So there's some limitations there because not everybody graduates. But I think that's a great start. We can build on it. I think it's borderline criminal that we don't also tell them, okay, what jobs do they get? Like, do the veterinarians graduates, do they work as vets? Or are they working somewhere else? Not that that's necessarily bad, but definitely a great idea. And then in terms of the second...
Quickly,
okay.
But that's okay. You've got what?
So the second question was about loans?
No, the second question, could they declare bankruptcy on loans?
On loans?
Yes.
That's a great question. So I would argue no for now,
Okay.
But I would put a cap on it. So I'd basically say you can't declare bankruptcy the first few years after graduation because nobody has any assets. But after a few years, open
Okay,
up.
great. Dr. Lindsay?
I changed my major 4 times in college, and I think most people do. Oftentimes, you choose a major not just because you're interested in the field, but you choose it because you love the faculty. And so I'm not a huge fan of saying that what you major in necessarily is the predictor of what your life success will be or the earnings that you'll have in that. I did a study of 550 senior leaders, and I found 73% of them actually majored in a liberal arts field, even though most of them were working in business later. So the major is not directly the predictor of what your long-term success is, but I think it's important for us to be more transparent of the outcomes that our students are getting, and that's what I think you're trying to get at.
Right, and certainly if you're switching majors, wouldn't be bad to have that website to see, all right, even though I really like this faculty, what's my future like? Dr.
Yes,
Brown?
Senator, absolutely. I believe we should have to show students what the average earnings are in that region for the degree that they choose. I think that's a big deal. It's not just for that. There may be some majors, and I'll use teaching as an example, where we have people who want to be teachers, but we all know full well those teachers will not necessarily earn the same thing as compared to others. In terms of your second question on bankruptcy, I believe there are catastrophic things that happen in the lives of everyone, and so student loans, like any other kind of debt, should be eligible. for bankruptcy.
Interesting.
Career and labor market outcomes are critical. We infuse those into our first advising session with our community college students. A national model would be exceptional. It just needs to be reflected of the community and what's happening in the economy in that local community. I think it also needs to be reflected back to the programs themselves, where they know what their student outcomes are and can adjust their curriculum to be responsive to it.
And that bankruptcy?
I'm going to leave that to the policy experts.
Oh, now we're Mr. Pierce.
Well, then I'll take my cue and I'll start with bankruptcy and say restoring people's rights to bankruptcy is vital. We've had a decades-long experiment denying people bankruptcy rights, and it's resulted in people staying in debt for decades into retirement. The government is required to chase people down and take their Social Security checks. Having an exhaust valve in the student loan system makes people get a fresh start and live whole economic lives. I would also note, just building on what I think I agree with what everybody else said about the value of data and shopping and transparency. The Trump administration has fired the statisticians responsible for managing the college scorecard. We are flying blind now.
Wow. That's very sobering. Well, I'm out of time, but I'm not out of questions. I will maybe come back for a second round later, or I will submit them in writing, but I appreciate your work. For the record, I switched majors 3 times. I got a degree, undergraduate degree in English and creative writing, and I sucked as a writer, so my friends pointed that out to me. So that I ended up going back and getting a master's in geology, which is a pretty steep, but having a better understanding along the way would have, I think, been of value to a lot of students. I yield back to the chair.
Senator Hickenlooper, Senator Warren and I have the College Transparency Act. You should be a co-sponsor. It does exactly that which you were saying we should be doing.
I am.
Super. Well, thank you.
We younger junior senators don't always get the notice and appreciation that we deserve. But
let's get Kane and Blunt Rochester and these guys too.
I believe Senator Hickenlooper is up next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank all of you for your willingness to put yourselves through this and take on these challenges. Mr. Brightbill, I am a strong proponent of bipartisan permitting reform that includes targeted litigation reforms on various issues. The House bill, they've proposed a radical overhaul of our judicial review system by proposing a kind of pay-to-play or pay-for-play scheme. In your view, if someone pays or a company pays 125% of the estimated cost of your environmental review, the idea is that judicial review would no longer apply. And do you believe that allowing companies to pay for the right to avoid judicial oversight or judicial scrutiny gives communities and tribes sufficient ability to amend or challenge or change specific projects?
Senator, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to continue to talk about NEPA reform. As Senator Lee knows from my time in his office, I could geek out about this for a very, very long time. So as to the specific House bill that you're referencing, I've candidly not seen the bill or the provision that you're referring to, and based on what you're describing to me, I'm not candidly able to respond to it in total because I'm not aware of what the ultimate policy.
Well, it's pretty. It's just basically if you pay a higher rate, you are exempt from judicial oversight. In other words, the courts have no role in approving the permit.
I think Senator, I candidly want to look at the entirety of the bill and what the other reforms are and see how they tie in with other provisions of the bill before I would opine as to that particular provision. Want to understand the total context.
Okay, Mr. Prohaska, and I'm a big fan of RPE. I think you have the opportunity to catalyze transformational energy technologies and accelerate some of the commercialization of those things, and I think that's just going to be a big part of our future here, and hopefully will involve a lot of Colorado companies in there as well. How can you ensure RPE continues to serve as a springboard for these high-impact startups, the companies that really can be transformational without sufficient long-term dependence on financing, federal financing?
Senator, first off, thank you very much for the question. I have no doubt that Colorado will play a huge role in that ecosystem. One of the things from an outsider's point of view that I've always admired about Colorado is the major research institutions, whether it's NREL, Mines, Colorado State, University of Colorado, the list goes on, are very well coordinated. Not to mention outside of energy, but the quantum that is going on in the state is quite fascinating as well. So I commend the state on the efforts that go into that. To answer your question, I talked a little bit about it earlier, that part of the crucible of becoming an RPE project is the review process. And what we also do is once you are an RPE project, if confirmed, we'll continue this, active project management. That's continuous evaluation of these projects. It's a high-risk, high-reward effort. And you talked about how do we make sure some of these companies and products and technologies become companies. Part of that high-risk, high-reward means there's a high reward at the end, but that in between the high-risk and high-reward, a lot of things fall off. And that's part of kind of the RPE ethos is we're going to continue to actively manage projects, put the best minds towards it, look at it with a fresh point of view as often as possible. And then to your last point, to make sure it's not on a long-term federal pipeline of funding to continue on for eternity.
Right, no, I get that.
We want to make sure that we're engaging with whether it's venture capital, investors, that we're continuing to keep them communicating with them and educated on what we're doing at RPE.
Thank you. And Dr. Mamula, first, just an idle curiosity. So you went to Penn State. Where did you do field camp, field geology camp? Yes, sir. Which one did you go to? Well, they had the Yellowstone research. So you went to the YBRA.
The YBRA, I've been there, and I've also been to the other one across the Appalachians.
Right. Yeah, I hadn't been to that one, but I did do my same geological field work through the Yellowstone Bighorn.
Geologist, Senator.
There can be no closer tie than to have done the same field geology camp.
Together. Yeah.
USGS, obviously critical for so much we're working on. I'm going to be very brief in this question. Water-focused science is key for us in Colorado and the drought-prone West. Just because if you can't measure something, you're not going to be able to manage it. And yet we've seen severe cuts at the USGS. The threat in this essential work and the integrity of these long-term data resources, and that data, keeping that data in place is critical. Can you make that? Are you willing to say absolutely you make that a priority to maintain those systems of measure that we've been using and to expand those data sets?
Oh, Senator. Absolutely. Look.
Yeah.
Senator, this has to be a priority, and if confirmed, I'm going to make it my business to make sure it is. Now, the data set integrity, is that what you're getting at?
Well, the cuts in funding, they've cut almost a third of the budget. So and part of that means that they're talking about just we don't need to save this data because it doesn't seem relevant now. Whereas in science, mostly, as you know, oftentimes data that doesn't seem relevant today, 5 years from now, seems really relevant.
Right. If confirmed, and I'm going out there, and we're going to look at our data collection, and, you know, with the capacity of data storage today, there's really no need to dispose of data. We can hang on to data as long as we need to, and by the way, there's plenty of data that can be digitized and put to work again years and years after it was first published. So this is a priority. USGS is a data factory. So this is what's produced there should be also saved. And
thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it very much. And Ms. Pierce, I've got questions for you, but I'll put them in writing.
Yeah.
I yield back. Thank you.
We'll turn now to Senator Hoeven, who twice in the last couple of weeks has been my stunt double as I've been called into other hearings. I'm told he's going to do his questioning today entirely in Spanish, which should be exciting.
Mr. President.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, this month, my fellow colleagues in the Senate, the Republican Senate members, are working to pass a budget proposal that I feel can best be described as dangerous. Their plan's going to dramatically reduce even gut services like Medicaid and SNAP, getting food to hungry, low-income workers. It'll strip health care away from most likely more than 16 million Americans and threaten millions of seniors living in nursing homes. All of this is focused really on just trying to get larger tax rates to very wealthy people who don't really, in most cases, don't really want them, or the largest corporations. This lavish, and I think lavish is the only word that describes it fairly, this lavish tax bill gives more to the top earners while taking away from the Americans with the least. But it really doesn't have to be that way. If the Republicans could focus on extending tax cuts for working families rather than the wealthiest, they could, in and of that self, that one effort, that one initiative, they could avoid ripping away health care from more than 15 or 16 million Americans and gutting our much-needed investments in climate change and fighting climate change and to make sure we have lower energy prices. Instead, they're going full steam ahead with really what is a god-awful bill. I want to focus today on another dangerous part of this plan, how it explodes our national debt and really risks our economic future. Many proponents of the bill love to hem and haw about being financially responsible, but like a few people in here, I've managed budgets before. Back when I started Colorado's first brew pub, and then as mayor and as governor of Colorado, mayor of Denver and governor of Colorado. So I know something about fiscal responsibility, and it's not partisan. At its best, fiscal responsibility should be bipartisan. I can definitely say this bill that we're looking at is the opposite of fiscal responsibility. It's fiscal madness. This is a massive spending bill that's going to create the largest national debt in American history. And you don't have to take words for it. You can look at the numbers. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that the House Republican plan, so this is the plan coming over from the House, would add $2.7 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $2.7 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. The Penn-Wharton model, which includes something like north of $500 billion in the additional interest payments from that accumulated debt over year after year after year over those 10 years, suggests it would add up to not just $2.7 trillion, but more like $3.2 or $3.3 trillion. The bill our Senate colleagues are putting together makes many of the same mistakes. And I think by most measures that a small business person would look at, it's reckless. The bottom line is more American tax dollars would go towards tax cuts for, again, at least in Colorado, the very wealthy people I've talked to aren't asking for, aren't seeking these tax cuts. And they, under this tax plan that is coming over to us right now, those tax cuts for the very wealthy are coming instead of expanding access to health care or building roads or improving our schools. And more tax dollars would go to paying off the massive debt, paying the interest on the massive debt, than all our defense spending combined. It will become more than 25% of our federal budget just to pay the interest on the debt. Now, if that sounds like a bad idea to you, it's because it is. And the markets agree. Moody's, the last major credit rating agency to maintain U.S. as highest level of rating, its highest, designated a safe place to invest your money, just downgraded our credit rating. It's the first time that's happened, and it shook investors that Moody would downgrade our credit rating. Investors aren't confident that the U.S. will be able to pay its debts. And that's, at least in terms of Moody's, has never happened before, and it's really just going to lead to more trouble. Those investors who buy those 10-year bonds and help pay for our national debt are demanding higher returns because they view it as a riskier investment. They need a higher return if they're going to hold U.S. debt, which forces, since you've got to attract that investment, it means you've got to offer higher interest rates, which means you've got higher borrowing costs. And that means that Coloradans and Americans are going to pay higher interest rates when they want to buy a house or expand their business, or if they want to pay off their credit cards. They're going to have to pay more because the interest rates are going to be higher. Now, Americans are already plenty concerned about rising prices for good reason. This whole system could lead to the dreaded stagflation. This could all become a 1-2 punch to working families. All the while, the wealthiest families end up being better off. Now, we don't need to do this. We can certainly grow our economy, we can help working families, and we can cut the deficit. We were able to balance the budget all 8 years I was mayor of Denver, all 8 years I was governor, and still grow our investments in our roads, in our education system, in our healthcare system. We also did this with the Inflation Reduction Act, which would reduce the deficit by over $175 billion over the next 10 years, and has already dramatically lowered a number of prescription drug costs. It's expanded healthcare access, and in the process, created hundreds of thousands of good jobs. The Republican budget, I think, does the opposite. We also can't forget that this budget comes in the midst of the Trump administration's efforts around tariffs. What our good friend, the senator from Washington, was just talking about when she described the consequences of Smoot-Hawley, and how those tariffs, just at 20%, led to a global slowdown in the overall economy. We all know that these tariff taxes are really not so hidden, but they're taxes on the American people. They raise prices on everything from groceries to kitchen appliances. Now, none of this is a growth strategy. It really is a recipe for recession at the best, stagflation at the worst. We can't borrow millions, we can't borrow billions, we can't borrow trillions just to hand out tax cuts to the top when working families are struggling to be able to afford everyday goods. It doesn't add up. It never has, it never will. Now, there are many issues that may be partisan, but being financially responsible doesn't need to be one of them. Neither should good, strong economies, neither should economic fairness, neither should protecting working families. They don't have to do it this way. Now, I'm always game to roll up my sleeves and dig into the balance sheet, but we haven't seen from the other side that they're willing to negotiate or really invest in the long-term economic growth. I'd suggest that we write a budget that reflects our values and puts tax cuts toward working families first. A budget that strengthens the middle class, one that keeps our economy strong and will keep it growing for generations to come. This bill is not any of that. I urge my Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate not to temporarily put a pass on their values and to support this, again, I think truly reckless fiscal bill. I hope that we can come together and together negotiate a better bill that does more economic growth and puts a far, far lesser penalty on the working people of America. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Murkowski, I think I owe you one there. Appreciate all of your public service. Let me start with you, Mr. Berry. In Colorado, we've got numerous employers who rely on H-2A and H-2B visas. Our strong agricultural economy relies on the H-2A program to make sure that people have fresh, safe food, quality food on their tables. Rocky Ford cantaloupes are known nationwide. Certainly, they're not available nationwide, but Palisade peaches are a rival to any Georgia peach. I would, if Senator Ossoff was here, I would say it out loud. In the same way, our powerhouse outdoor recreational economy relies on the H-2B program to operate our ski areas and a number of different outdoor recreational venues. So as part of Project 2025, you helped write that chapter on labor that called for the elimination of both of these programs. I don't know how we can find the domestic labor to fill these roles. If you ask any farmer, we're offering $22 an hour to people come pick peaches, and we cannot get the labor to do that. Both these programs are not perfect. I'm not saying they couldn't be improved, but they provide a much needed and necessary workforce. And these visa holders contribute to our economy and then return home to their countries. This is not the problem that that the president campaigned on. So if confirmed, are you going to push for the end of H visas at the Department of Labor?
Senator, I appreciate the question. My discussion of the topic, as you say in that book chapter, was part of my ongoing attempts at contributing to the policy conversation on these issues. As I know you're aware, my role, if confirmed, as Solicitor of Labor, is not a policymaking role. My role would be one of being one to help enforce the law and to keep the department within its legal bounds to the best of my abilities.
Well, but would you advocate? I mean, that's fine. And if so, if you are going to advocate, what would you suggest to the Secretary? How would you fill these labor gaps?
Well, so, Senator, again, what I would say there is, again, first of all, this is primarily a policy conversation. Secondly, I think we are. I think there are obviously some ongoing conversations in this space, including we're seeing kind of in real time what the labor market effects are as, for example, the Trump administration has been enforcing our immigration laws, and so you have. We're starting to see shifts in those labor markets, which I think need to be studied in order to understand. The last thing I did want to say about the policy proposals was it was not an advocacy for any sort of immediate cessation. These were supposed to be thoughtful, targeted, sort of capped and predictable phase downs over a lengthy period of time, and in the agriculture context, supported specifically by investments in agricultural production improvements and technology that can improve the productivity of American workers, productivity being the thing that allows greater wage growth.
I hear you. Mr. Rogers, in 2023, the Department of Labor leveled a $1.5 million civil penalty against Packer Sanitation Services, one of the largest food and sanitation service providers, after they found children were working with hazardous machines and cleaning dangerous powered equipment. In response to the Packer Sanitation case and additional reports, Senator Padilla and I both pressed the CEOs of 37 major companies who had been accused of participating in exploitive child labor practices. And we pressed them. Our letter demanded that the companies take immediate steps to cease these practices. Obviously, Senator Hawley has been talking about child labor as well, and I couldn't agree with him more strongly. During the Biden administration, the Wage and Hour Division launched a National Child Labor Strategic Enforcement Initiative to prioritize investigations of the most egregious and exploitive child labor violations. So, Mr. Rogers, if confirmed, what's your plan at Wage and Hour to root out illegal child labor practices?
Thank you, Senator. And as I had responded to a previous question, I think following what the department has already begun, the Secretary has said she intends to double down on enforcement of child labor, and that is something that the Wage and Hour Division is something that will continue to do and use the resources that are available, the data that's available, to continue that important work.
I appreciate that. I'm out of time, but I will have other questions. Trust me, no one you'll all have a chance. I'll submit them in writing. And appreciate, again, your time coming here and your willingness to serve.
Senator.
Thank you. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Secretary, Governor, thank you for being here. Your budget proposes transferring public lands out of federal management, and a couple places refers to a bloated federal estate. But in many cases, these lands are supportive of our outdoor recreation, $17 billion recreation in Colorado, $1.2 trillion nationwide. And there's discussion of in your remarks about increasing outdoor access, but the BLM recreation budget, which is where most of that access gets created, is down 60%, and that's not just compared to last year, that's compared to pre-COVID. I'm very sensitive to that notion that, you know, during COVID, the budgets went spending. So I've done all my numbers back to 2019, and that 60% cut, I mean, as a former business owner, we both are, when you make those kinds of dramatic cuts, it's often hard to get just the fat. You end up getting a lot of what's really necessary as well. So I guess I'd ask, shouldn't we be looking at ways to make better investment, but still maintain, to a significant extent, those investments in outdoor recreation and in our access to public lands?
Yes, Senator, thank you, or I should say Mayor, Governor, Senator. We agree with your comments, and this is certainly when we want to make sure that we're being strategic in terms of where we're applying the dollars. Love the fact that you've gone back and done that analysis to 2019. You may be ahead of some of the work we're trying to do with the systems that we're trying to have this, trying to put together a look so we can see where we were, because when people talk about dramatic cuts, sometimes the cut would take us back to 2021 spending, and I'm like, wow, we've got, you know, the world wasn't falling apart in 2021. Maybe we could live with that for a while as we try to balance the budget. But I appreciate that. Recreation is such an important, the outdoor recreation industry is massive. I mean, it's like 3% of the employment in this country is now in outdoor recreation, and that group does so much. I mean, they're doing so much. They do. This is a group broadly that is leading in conservation. I mean, you know, hunters, fishermen, anglers, campers, climbers, those are the people that are contributing their own personal dollars back. So this is a community that's of utmost importance to us going forward. So I appreciate your zeroing in on that piece, and we'll continue to take a hard look at that.
Yeah, and I think even the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service caught my attention. Going back to 2019, it's cut 30%. And I know from experience as a governor that they run pretty lean always anyway, and that's kind of the foundational for a lot of outdoor recreation, is making sure the habitat for wild animals, for fish, that we maintain, and always are trying to think about ways we efficiently and cost effectively can improve that.
Yeah, and they run 65 fish hatcheries, which then help support all the entire fishing industry as well. So.
Absolutely, and it's a place where, in many ways, it helped pay its own way, because there are all sources of revenues as well. You know all that. Wildfires and confronting this wildfire crisis really does push us towards making our forests more resilient. But obviously, staffing losses and BLM's land resources funding being cut by a third, again, back to 2019, I'm worried about our capacity to respond to the wildfire risk, and especially how do we make sure we have resilience. And it's complicated, and I'm not trying to gloss over the complications. How do you expect the BLM is going to be able to deliver on the wildfire and forest management goals when you're making these kinds of cuts to the workforce and to critical parts of the planning?
Well, as we head into this wildfire season, we just had a briefing yesterday, but Secretary Brooke Rollins and I have been working together. We've held joint reviews on firefighting. We've talked about ways to gain additional efficiencies at the operational headquarters overhead level, so that we can put more boots on the ground, literally. This summer, we're about 17,000 staffing across the two agencies for wildfighters, so we're about equal with where we were last year. But there's no hiring freeze on that. We still have positions open. If people are interested in jumping in and having an amazing summer experience, we can get them trained up for wildfire fighting. But we're also looking at some other models. There's a great model that's going on in Alaska between the state and the federal government. And we also, this budget proposal does include that we would consolidate the wildland firefighting of, because there's 4 firefighting units in interior, 1 in fish and wildlife. Sometimes we're well coordinated, other times we've got like 5 generals pursuing different strategies and tactics, and when we have a checkerboard of federal land. So I think there's so we're taking a hard look at some opportunities there, and we've got Senator Sheehy and others are advancing legislation to take a look at this as well. So we'd be happy to continue that dialogue, particularly with states that are deeply involved in having their own state resources.
Right, like Colorado. I appreciate that. We'll stay in touch and pursue that. I yield back.
I think for that, before I go to Senator Hickenlooper, I'll notice for the first time in this hearing you smiled when you asked about antimicrobial resistance. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just a sweet spot for you. So, Senator Hickenlooper.
Dr. Menards, thank you so much for your public service, and obviously your dedication and commitment to the work you're doing is noteworthy and I think laudable. You obviously have a lot of experience in technology research and development, including how to identify and treat infectious diseases. How would you incorporate this experience in, as you know, if you are confirmed for this position?
Thank you. And again, thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I know there's a lot going on in here, so I appreciate all of your time in meeting with me in advance. So I do have almost 30 years of experience in science, technology, and innovation. And what I will do if I'm confirmed with this as the CDC director is I'll want to make sure, as I laid out in my priority, is that first, that we are incorporating the latest and state-of-the-art technologies into the work that we're doing within CDC, that we're modernizing our laboratory capabilities, that we're investing in diagnostics with the level of sensitivity and specificity that if there is an urgent outbreak, that we are able to support our state and local public health officials with accurate diagnostics so that they can differentiate between individuals who are worried and those who are truly in need of medical intervention. It helps us prioritize resources, and it helps to make sure that we're keeping American people safe. I will also bring in AI technologies to help in a couple of different ways. When I think about AI, the first thing I say is, what problems are we trying to solve? And when you can define accurately what the problems are you are trying to solve, it allows you to have a disciplined way to incorporate these technologies that are really transforming what we think about in health innovation. I'll be using AI technologies to help support CDC to create a modernized and operationally efficient organization where we look at how do we optimize our workforce, how do we make sure that our IT is supportive of internal operations and partnerships with state and locals, how do we make sure that we achieve fiscal responsibility through accurate tracking of all of our resource expenditures. I'll also be incorporating AI technologies as we continue to support public health outcomes. So the areas that AI I think is going to be transformative in the health ecosystem is where we can work internally and with our partners to say.
That's good. You know, I've got another question. I apologize. I hate cutting you off. I love talking technology.
Well, I look forward to following up with you if I'm confirmed.
Exactly. And in contrast to some of my colleagues across the aisle, I am very concerned about the cuts to Medicaid, certainly aware that there are always improvements, and you can find examples of fraud, waste, and abuse in pretty much any. I've been a mayor, I've been a governor. We're always dealing with that. It's a constant struggle. It's the same in any corporation, to be quite blunt. But I think that Medicaid is essential to community health centers. I helped start a community health center, we discussed a little bit, way back in 1972, 1973, that now has over 200 locations, is an essential part of providing access to health care, in this case all across the state of Connecticut. For them, Medicaid is essential to being able to provide that care and be compensated for it so they don't collapse financially. And I think it's amazing that in Colorado, we're besieged by concern from rural healthcare providers, from community health centers, that if these cuts go forward, they will be in peril of going out of business. Do you see any solutions, or how can we address this potential issue?
So that is a very critical issue. I had an opportunity in a previous role to really come to appreciate the value that these federally qualified health centers and rural health clinics play. And sometimes they're the only health that is accessible for some of our rural and vulnerable populations. And I do think fiscal viability of these has always been a challenge in making sure that although they operate on a very thin margin, that they're able to continue to support and keep their doors open to help the population that they serve. As the CDC director, I don't know that I'll have a great deal of influence or ability to shape policy related to the health centers and to rural health clinics, but they are a very important part of our health ecosystem.
Right. Well, certainly disease control, you've got to be able to have access to healthcare, as you pointed out. And I think you'll be surprised how much influence you're going to have. You know, just your range of experience and your approach to what you're doing is going to give you, your voice is going to carry further than most. Anyway, I yield back to the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hickenlooper, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my colleague from Idaho, I appreciate all your work. I share a lot of that history with you. We worked on our roadless rule. I think it got finally enacted in 2012. I came in and got elected in 2010. So it took a big part of my first couple years to get everybody around that table and make sure that every single hunters and anglers and timber merchants, and you go down the list, everyone signed off on that roadless rule. And it was a remarkable achievement. I don't think it's been, to my knowledge, it's never been litigated since. We moved heaven and earth to make sure that everybody was at the table, because it did help. Doesn't solve the problem. And I mean, the problem writ large is that we have a lot of people in this country that want to live in the woods and they want to experience wildlife and be closer to wildlife. And we see more and more people living in that wildland-urban interface. And I'm deeply concerned about our ability to keep them safe. And we're working on our Fix Our Forests Act. It's going to help accelerate the ability to allow thinning of forests, ecological thinning, so that we can make sure that the forests aren't so vulnerable. But the cuts that look like kind of come through your budget in terms of firefighters, sorry, really concerns me. And we have in our national forest in Colorado, we've got the maroon bells, we've got, well, I go down the list, Fish Creek Falls, a whole bunch of iconic views that people talk about and dream about and come visit. And as every year, we're really worried about when a wildfire gets out of control, how do we keep people safe? And not just the people that live in the wildland-urban interface, but it's visitors that don't know their way around and are going to get caught up in a place where they're going to have their entire summer disrupted or actually become in danger. So with the budget cuts, I guess my first question is, how are you going to keep Coloradans, but people from all across this country, safe?
So, Senator, thanks for the question. The first response is that the budget, the 26 budget, does not reduce our firefighting resources or capacity. It transfers it from the Forest Service to Department of Interior to create this new Wildland Fire Service. But there is no reduction in the firefighting budget that is established. So there is no reduction in that case. What we have been talking about, though, is there are reductions on some of the state and private components. And that's maybe what you're alluding to, is the SFA, VFA piece. And that's the piece that, as I've testified previously, that would be shifting from the Forest Service paying for those costs or Interior to the states to cover those costs.
Right. Well, I think what I see again and again throughout all the budgets we're seeing is more costs shifted from the federal government to states and local areas that are going through their own budget struggles right now. I also understand that we need to both streamline our permitting and all of our financial services to look at the wildlife crisis. In what other ways are you promoting resilience in terms of forest fires and those efforts?
So, Senator, I think a big part of what we look at is, the suppression is just the back end of this. Ideally, what we want to do is be very active managers, and that's using prescribed fire, it's using mechanical thinning, it's using commercial timber sales. All of those are critical to making sure that we create resilience and protect communities. One of the big things I mentioned earlier that Congress did back in December is you all passed a disaster supplemental, and there was funding in there for Sierra Pacific to actually do fuel breaks on federal lands, on Forest Service lands in California and Oregon. So to me, those are some of the innovative approaches that we're looking at. We can partner with industry and partner with the states. We just signed an agreement with the state of Montana. We're actually having discussions with the state of Colorado right now, looking at a similar type arrangement where the state could come in and assist in managing some of the federal lands in a broader way. We've also had discussions about even on recreation and how the state can assist in managing recreation. Pikes Peak, for instance, is an area that the state has expressed interest in managing that site. So we are looking very much from a perspective of cooperating with the states to look at how we can address some of these issues.
Appreciate that. Your budget also proposes a land transfer initiative to right-size the federal land. Coloradans, and I can't tell you how many tens of thousands of notices we have, do not want public lands put up for sale, certainly not in any scale. I think we're okay, recognized in certain small areas, isolated circumstances, maybe for workforce housing or something like that in a small mountain community. But I think county commissioners, town councils, mayors, Republicans, Democrats, all called us, wrote us, said, do not sell our public lands at scale. It's certainly not to try and reduce the deficit. So hopeful that you'll listen to local governments and public citizens to recognize that that's not a constructive direction to take the Forest Service.
So, Senator, one of the things, I think you alluded to this, there's been a big focus on housing. The administration has looked at this issue and is concerned that as communities want to grow and they're surrounded by federal lands, there's limiting opportunities. So the Forest Service is looking at this issue. We did a 99-year lease on the White River Forest that is an existing administrative site that is going to be leased for housing. And we're looking at opportunities in Oregon and in Idaho as well. So where we have tracts, we have authority to sell 40 acres right now. It's the Small Tract Act. But we also are looking at other ways to dispose, and those can be long-term leases where we can encourage where communities want to expand ski resorts, for instance, right, where there's not enough housing for employees, where there are current administrative sites. We're not talking about going into the backcountry. We're talking about we have admin sites that are in areas where they're eroded and those kind of things, where you can take those sites and maybe make affordable housing. So that's the opportunities that we're looking at right now.
Okay, well, I'm out of time, but when you use language like right-sizing the federal estate, I think that notion of scale that language creates is of great concern to a lot of people. So just keep that, be mindful.
Normally, we go back and forth. I have to be here anyway, so I'm going to let Hickenlooper go before me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Christine, Secretary Kennedy announced that he had plans for the department to mine, quote unquote, extract and utilize the data from Medicare and Medicaid claims to inform his investigation into the causes of autism. Now, this database would include information from wearable devices like an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring, things like that. Now, as a physician, and obviously I think you obviously understand the value of personal health privacy, does this concern you?
So, Senator, number one, thank you for being here, sir. I'm sorry we didn't have the chance to meet. You know, in terms of pursuing the Make America Healthy agenda, we know that the Secretary is absolutely committed to doing that, to collecting data and operating from a position of science. I have not spoken to the Secretary or heard specifically his thoughts about the wearable devices, and I would want to do that before I make comment. And I, if confirmed, I commit to you that I would certainly have that discussion and be happy to discuss that with you again.
Sure, and make a commitment to ensure that the database and all these other collection efforts at the HHS uphold the highest levels of privacy.
Well, we absolutely want to respect patients' privacy, and we absolutely want to pursue the ending of chronic diseases.
Great, thank you. Ms. Carey, the President's budget request proposed cutting NLRB
by $14 million, roughly 5% of the budget. Now, according to the agency's budget plan, NLRB said it will lose almost 100 employees in the next fiscal year through buyouts and early retirements. Are you worried these cuts are going to, obviously they include the general counsel's office, are they going to impact the ability for the board to really do its job effectively?
Thank you for the question. One of the things that I want to do, and I've discussed a couple of times, is I want to make sure that there's a full organizational assessment performed for both the field and headquarters to ensure that staffing is appropriately used so that we can respond to cases in a timely manner. So while I wasn't privy to what the background was on how they got those numbers or where they landed, I look forward to, if confirmed, working with the agency to ensure that we're properly staffed.
Okay, fair enough. Dr. Christine, HHS has released an updated guidance on the eligibility for the COVID-19 vaccine. Some groups of individuals who've previously been covered now will not be covered, or likely will not be covered. And this has caused a significant level of concern between patients and providers as to which vaccines would be covered by insurance and who might be forced to pay out of pocket for those costs. So are you concerned that this is going to require physician offices to do, even more administrative, burdensome work to figure out who has coverage, who doesn't, while at the same time doing all the things you've got to do, provide medical advice, make sure you're taking care of that patient?
Sure. Senator, thank you so much for that question. Secretary Kennedy has always been clear, and he believes we need to follow the science when it comes to any kind of medical therapy, and that would apply to vaccines and to immunizations. Regarding what is recommended or what is on the schedule, we know that science is not static. Science is dynamic. It can change over time, and certainly the Secretary wants us to be able, if science in the future and data leads us down the road where we need to make changes to the schedule, for instance, that we'd be willing to pivot and do that if science leads us in that direction. We always want to be responsible to do that. In terms of coverage of the vaccines, of course, what's recommended is going to be covered, but we have to be able to pivot. We have to be able to change if we find a need to do so in the future.
And how do you look at, when you say science directs us, when there's a disagreement within the scientific establishment, how do you look at distilling out what it is that science is telling you?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question. Thank you. One of the hallmarks of data that can be trusted or believed is reproducibility. And certainly Dr. Bhattacharya spoke to this during his hearing, that if there is, let's say, two sets of data that may not agree 100%, we have to have reproducibility. In other words, we can always do more studies, more science to try to figure out what is reproducible and what is actually true. And that's probably the best way to figure out what the right answer is.
Well, certainly part of it. That's excuse me, part of a longer discussion. Probably need some medical assistance.
Well, I'm a urologist. I can't help with a cough. I'm sorry about that.
I appreciate that. I yield back to the chair.
I want to thank Senator Moreno for his impassioned and very well-informed questioning, and just point out for the record that I fully agree we need lower-cost cars, and one of the keys is never, ever, ever get the undercoating on the car. The answer to that is no. And with that, I recognize Senator Hickenlooper.
That also went out in the 70s.
Uh-huh. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank all three of you for taking your time out today. Let me start with Mr. Morrison. Impaired driving is a threat to passengers, cyclists, pedestrians, everybody. Last year, the U.S. saw almost 40,000 fatalities involving motor vehicles, 12,429 fatalities involved alcohol-impaired driving. That's 30% of all fatalities. We have a national blood alcohol concentration, BAC, a national limit of 0.08% to determine alcohol impairment. Currently, there is no uniform national standard to measure marijuana impairment. In Colorado, marijuana impaired driving is a blood test above 5 nanograms of THC. At least 16 other states have zero tolerance laws prohibiting any amount of drug impairment while driving. Creating a national standard for marijuana impairment is going to ease the burden of law enforcement, of prosecutions, help clarify legal requirements across states, and without question, save countless lives. So, Mr. Morrison, what steps would you direct NHTSA to take in consultation with states, our laboratories of democracy, to develop a national impairment standard for marijuana-impaired driving?
I think NHTSA absolutely plays a critical role here. And during my time as chief counsel in the first term, we were really pushing hard this campaign against drug-impaired driving. Some of the messaging we put out, drive high, get a DUI. If you feel different, you drive different. I think there isn't this necessarily public consciousness that when people are using marijuana, that it has an impairing effect on their ability to drive a vehicle. And it harkens back to the 50s. If you look at research, people would say it was pretty common for them to say, I need another martini so I can calm down. I drive better when I'm impaired. I think we haven't had that. There's absolutely been a shift in perception there, although impaired driving, alcohol-impaired driving is too high. We haven't seen that similar shift for marijuana. It's absolutely something that I would intend to double down on. I would also look to partner with, I think, the Office of National Drug Control Policy to work with them on that as well as law enforcement in the states.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those lurking giants that's out there, and the country has not gotten their arms around the fact that more and more kids are smoking pot instead of drinking. You can see alcohol sales, beer sales down all over the country, and yet we have no national program to really intercede and make sure they understand that they're not driving better.
Right, and the poly use is another issue. There's compounding factors of alcohol use with drug use that also need to be recognized. I do understand there are some scientific challenges to really gaining that notion of whether or not there's a threshold level.
Well, it's like alcohol. It's different size people. There's some variation there, but the science is getting there, and certainly the level of impairment can clearly be measured and calculated against the consumption of narcotic.
Absolutely, and it's an area where I know you've been a national leader. I appreciate that, and would look forward to working with you.
You bet. Mr. Roberti, nationwide, PHMSA oversees safe operation of 3 million miles of pipeline, 17,000 underground storage tanks, more than 160 liquefied natural gas facilities. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack was a stark reminder of the vulnerability of critical infrastructure to cyber attacks. PHMSA and pipeline operators rely on information provided by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Administration, CISA, as well as the private sector. Information sharing increases the ability to remain resilient against emerging cyber threats. Unless extended by Congress, authorities under the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015 is set to expire on September 30th, 2025. So, Mr. Roberti, do you believe any lapse in authorities to share cyber threat information would increase risk for pipeline operators, and how could PHMSA maintain cyber resilience?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question. And I spoke earlier about the critical importance of keeping a very focused eye on both physical and cybersecurity threats. The Colonial Pipeline, a perfect example, 45% of the energy needs of the Northeast come through that pipeline. And the interruption of that flow of commodities was significant. The coordination among federal agencies is so important. I can't understate it. If you look over the course of the history of this country, the greatest vulnerabilities occurred where security agencies were not sharing information. I do support sharing. As I stated earlier, I had worked previously on agreements with the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Transportation. I believe we need close coordination and information sharing, not just with industry, but across the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FBI, certainly the Department of Energy, and the Department of Homeland Security. I am very committed and very motivated to dig in on those questions and see where we are. I don't know where we are today, but I know that the threats are there. The threat vectors are always changing, and I'm committed to working cooperatively to advance that.
I'm out of time, but I do want to leave just with Mr. Morrison that the fact that there are no federal statutes or regulations that oversee fully autonomous vehicles yet coming out of our laboratories of democracy. That should be, I'm going to submit a few questions on that in the written, just because we're out of time now, but I think that's another big issue that we're going to have to face. Yield back to the chair. Well, I don't want to interrupt that dialogue. I certainly look at the budgetary issues that came out of one big beautiful bill, or we call it the big ugly bill on our side. It really has created massive budget holes in Medicaid and SNAP, forcing states like Colorado to make really difficult, almost impossible decisions in balancing their budget. The shutdown has only made it worse. And I think as states are forced to make up for Trump's cuts in key programs, states across the country are wrestling with the same issue that Colorado is. These are impossible decisions impacting real families as they try to balance their budgets after the drop-off, the dramatic drop-off at various levels from the federal government. So in Colorado, the states had to make a sequence of very difficult cuts around Medicaid dental care, affordable housing programs, higher education funding, public health services. They're almost impossible to make because of all at every level, these cuts in federal funding to states. So, President Turner, as you know, there is a crisis going on right now, a healthcare crisis unfolding across the country. In the next several days, millions of Americans will receive notices in the mail that their premiums aren't just going up 15 or 20%, but going up, in many cases, 50%, 100%, as in advance of the open enrollment that starts on November 1st. This is on top of the millions of Americans that will lose their access to Medicaid because of the cuts that came across from the big beautiful bill. President Turner, in your testimony, you talk about the impacts of loss of access to care. What this is not just the impact on the patients, but also on the providers who care for them. Obviously, especially the nurses. Layoffs, unsafe staffing, service reductions. These are all exaggerated at rural hospitals. When you look at these cuts, what is the single thing that keeps you up at night? What's the part that you look at as what happens to nurses in rural areas if they're no longer able to care for patients?
Especially thank you, Senator, for that question, especially in rural America, all of these communities, oftentimes, whatever healthcare facility they have, be it a nursing home, a hospital, or a clinic, they're probably like the biggest employer of the town, okay? At least that's how it is in Minnesota. And so you start having all of these hospitals close, or clinics, or whatever it might be, close because they can't afford to stay open, that has a ripple effect, an economic ripple effect, and it turns that town into a ghost town. Because I'm sorry, you take away the healthcare facility and the school, and a town dies. And we've all seen it. You got one grocery store and maybe one bar, and that's all that's left. Okay? So it's denying. And then let's just take the labor and delivery world. I dread to have been having children nowadays if I'm in rural America, and you're having to travel 50, 100 miles when you're in labor because the nearest place is the big town.
I hear you. Your point is well made.
Thank you.
Mr. Arnold, I'm a firm believer in diverse, cost-effective pathways to careers. We've millions of young people each year that are choosing not to go to a four-year college, that just growing. We need strong pathways for them. While I was governor, we started working on expanding quality youth apprenticeship programs. A lot of what we started in Colorado, I think we're in 22 states. In your testimony, you mentioned it takes a long time to become a trusted journeyman, capable of the complex work you do. You also honed your skills as a mechanic in the Army. Another example of earn while you learn model. From your perspective on the shop floor, could you speak to the value of apprenticeship programs for building the kind of highly skilled, robust workforce that our aerospace, defense industries, and so many others all depend on?
Thank you for your question, Senator. No amount of book learning can replace firsthand experience. I also have a four-year degree
But I also have done the, like you say, the Earn While You Learn program as well. And you might learn something from the engineers about how this is supposed to go together, but then if you go talk to the aircraft mechanics,